The events unfold in the very center of Mount Gamelpiece, surrounded by a large amount of lava. Rancor boldly heads straight to where dangerous adventures await him. Ranked 31st in Korea, Rancor walks on a hot rock from the heat, which he is saved from by fireproof boots. Without them, it would be impossible to survive. Thanks to the gear, he has a chance to get a legendary level item. It's inside a fire dragon that appears in a secret dungeon on Mount Gamelpiece. The rancher's pride is overwhelmed because he believes the object was created especially for him. Finally, he sees a door with an artifact in front of it and realizes that's where he has to go. It is the door to the secret dungeon where the legendary dragon sleeps, for which all this journey was made. Rancor is very excited about the upcoming meeting. He is full of determination and courage. After all, the sleeping dragon is just around the corner, which means the rancher's goal is close at hand. But on his way, he meets a man sleeping peacefully on the hot ground. Rancor can't figure out who this player is or what capabilities he possesses. He doesn't know what's going on here, but he needs to come to his senses. Then, he decides to look around and discovers that the player has legendary level gloves, weapons, and shoes. It occurs to Rancor to get one of these items. He's trying to gauge his capabilities and the strength of the player sleeping at the dragon dungeon. Realizing that the enemy is stronger and his fire resistance is higher, he still wants to try his luck while he sleeps. Decides to use a low blow to win. Rancor wonders who this player is, after all. He should be famous, but he's not one of the 100 strongest. This means it's an unofficial rancher, and we can't miss a chance to take him down while he's asleep. Applying the fire dragon bite attack, the rancher aimed his burning sword directly at the player, and then sees his performance take a turn for the worse. Despite this taste of victory, Rancor notices something has gone wrong. The opponent managed to dodge a punch that may have woken him up. Turns out he had a sudden onset seizure due to an activated narcolepsy skill. The punch activated the sleepwalking skill, so he's not awake. The sleeper attacks a rancher who doesn't see this coming. Seeing his tremendous speed, doesn't know how that's even possible. After the sleeping player teleports away, leaving the rancher in complete shock. Trying to anticipate his next move, he swings for a back kick. But unfortunately, they discover that there's no one there and no idea where the enemy has gone. Rancor feels that by all possible means, he should not allow himself to be attacked. To withstand the blows, he pulls out his shield of fire dragon scales, which is stronger than all his items. A chain with a sharp spear flies at him, which he overlooks at first. It is an attack that can't be dodged or blocked. Ahead of him, he finally sees the enemy surrounded by his chains. It deals a stun blow that weakens and stuns the ranger for 1 second. It's a real battle, and only one of the rankers can win. The sleeper boldly attacks the rancher, and he lets the sword out of his hands. Rancor takes critical damage and is hallucinated and in pain for 5 seconds, which makes him see his opponent as a giant monster with a scythe in his hands. This monster strikes the ranker's life and forcibly throws him out of the game for 24 hours. Slowly dissolving into thin air, he can't believe he couldn't beat a mere unofficial rancor. A sword and a bag of gold coins were left at the site of the loser's death. The winner stops being awake and lies down. Hours later, the rancher wakes up well rested. He notices the victory trophies next to him, realizing that the sleepwalking skill has been reactivated. Picking up a reward that couldn't just be left here, he jokingly apologized for what he'd done. Being in a good mood after a nap, he gets great stuff. Goes further into the dungeon for a legendary item from the dragon, because his goal is to get it and level up to become a real rancor. 1 year and 4 months after the launch of Idea, Henson has the class, the divine descendant of Thanatos, and the title, You Are Legendary, and I Am a God. A big city with tall, high-rise skyscrapers, one of which Henson works. Comes the angry voice of the park supervisor, pointing to the time on the clock. Henson didn't get to work on time because his sister's caregiver was late, and he now apologizes to Park. Colleagues overhearing this conversation feel sorry for Henson and wonder why the boss is being so hard on him despite his being a good worker. Perhaps he likes it that way because he received a prestigious education. At the same time, Henson only finished high school and joined a good company. Supervisor Park continues to berate the latecomer, wondering how much longer this will go on. Henson guiltily apologized. He is a good worker, handsome, and popular among his colleagues, but there is no way he can lose his job. Continuing to justify himself, he barely contains his anger, complicating the situation by flattering his boss for the sake of his ailing sister. Park ordered coffee to be brought to him, and Henson went into the coffee shop to get it. On his way back, He reflected on his position and realized that he needed to work under such conditions to earn a high salary. Henson was setting himself up for a hard day's work as usual, but looking around his office, thinking about how much he'd like to quit. He lives with his sister, Hyuna, in a tall apartment building left to him by his parents. After a long day of work, Henson comes home late at night. The nurse, when she saw him, came in and started to leave. Before leaving, she apologizes for her lateness that morning and promises to return early tomorrow. Henson sees her off and reminds her to be careful. He then goes to greet his sister, who is very happy to have him back. Hyuna is worried about her brother's condition because he has been working overtime again. Henson wonders how his sister's day went. They lost their parents when she was a child, and she became disabled. After that, he thoughtfully asks if Hyuna has had dinner, and she, in turn, inquires about it too. Wrapping up the discussion, Henson plans to change after work. When he leaves the room, he becomes sad again because of the fatigue he doesn't want to show his sister. They both remembered that terrible day 6 years ago. Hyuna and his parents were driving in the car on a rainy evening. Henson regrets not going with them. Suddenly, he notices a car's headlight approaching rapidly ahead. The parents' car collided with a truck that was traveling in the oncoming lane and breaking the rules. The parents in the front seat died at the scene. However, fortunately, Hyuna survived, but she lost the ability to walk on her own. It's been 6 years, but she blames herself because she asked me to drive her to the store. It's hard for Henson to grasp the fact that she saw her parents' deaths in her 14 years. But recently, the doctor informed them of a possible cure, and now Hyuna's health is improving. But through it all, she's always trying to support Henson, and can even smile no matter how much pain she's in. They still have a lot of fun making fun of each other. No matter what Hyuna does, her brother will never get mad at her. All she had to do was look at Henson with her eyes, and all the anger was gone. All thanks to a virtual reality game that the doctor recommended, even though Hyuna was initially skeptical. Later, her opinion changed because the world there was much more colorful than reality. Another land, and no phrase can describe this magical world. Even though the game was released over a year ago, it is still popular. Henson came to tuck Hyuna in and wondered if she needed anything, which pissed her off because she's not a kid anymore, and you shouldn't take care of her like that. As Henson left the room, he reminded his sister that she could use the bell if she needed anything. Henson actually bought the game pod not just for his sister but for himself as well. Although it was costly, it was worth the price due to its usefulness. It's a different time flow that allows Henson to sleep, although hardly anyone else uses the game that way. He could usually afford to sleep 5 hours, but in idea, that turns into 25 hours. If it wasn't for the capsule, he would have given up. Now, he'd like to meet the creator and thank him for the invention. Henson often thought that he could make a lot of money playing it because, right now, the idea is not just a game. It is the best and most popular game in the world, which brings huge profits. It is already a whole industry. Many people have given up their jobs to pursue it. Henson himself doesn't play it. He just sleeps it off, so he thinks he'd lack the skills. However, during his high school years, he excelled at games. He considered pursuing a professional career, but his parents advised against it. He can no longer think about those childhood dreams for the sake of his only family member. Stopping these thoughts in his head, he decides to join the game. The system recognizes the entered player by eye and then admits him to the game. Henson enters the game, confirming a launch program that immediately transports him to another world, namely in the village where newcomers are trained and get acquainted with the game universe for the first time. A village is a place where you can move around and adapt. Henson's all alone out there, but it doesn't bother him a bit because the bed is the most important thing to him, and he entered the game to get it. After Henson fell asleep, the system ran a recognition. It showed that he had slept 10,000 hours and was achieving a lot. He mentally appeals to his boss, Park, to say that things can change. After his beauty sleep, Henson wakes up not knowing what time it is. He looks at his watch. In the real world, it's almost 6 a.m., and he has to get ready for work and get some food. But before exiting the game, he notices a large number of open windows. They wrote about him changing classes and getting new skills for sleeping. When he sees his God-given rank, he doesn't know what it means. How could he achieve such high performance and still have points left over? He hasn't even been trained. The thought of making money in this game popped into Henson's head again. He needs to learn the rules of this game in more detail, so he decides to step out of it and understand everything later. Then, in the real world, he goes to the internet for information and is amazed at what he reads. With good skills, you can earn a high salary, but he's at a low level. Thinking that his savings are enough for 2 months, decides to raise it because he's fortunate. In the morning, Henson is in a good mood, standing in the kitchen, making scrambled eggs for breakfast while humming a tune. Hyun's voice comes from the bathroom. She asks about breakfast, and her brother responds by wondering if she needs help in there. Ignoring the negative answer, Henson bursts into the bathtub, making his sister indignant. She gets embarrassed when I ask if I can help her go to the bathroom and just asks me to hand her the stroller. Henson puts Hyun in a stroller, and she gets mad at him for thinking she's helpless and chases him out of the bathroom. He leaves to make breakfast, and at the last moment, he taunts her for her embarrassment because they are related, which makes Hyuna even more furious. As soon as the door closed and Hyuna was alone, she started trying to move her legs. The game makes her feel better, and she can stand on her own, but it takes time for her muscles to get stronger. At the unexpected next question for help, she falls back in her chair and swears at her brother. He says she doesn't have to be afraid to ask him for help with something. Hyun grudgingly informs her that if she needs it, she'll ask for it, but considering the lock on the door, it's not a good idea to go into the bathroom without asking. She wants to keep her progress a secret from her brother until she's fully recovered. Afterward, Henson is already at his unloved job at the high-rise office. Goes to Chief Park and gives him the sheet. Excited, he asks what it is, even though he can see it himself. A pleased Henson smilingly informs him that it's his resignation. A discouraged Park, assuming it's because of their fight the night before, asks him, saying he shouldn't give up over such a small thing. Other office workers watching the situation wonder why this could have happened, fearing they might be Park's next victims. Trying to keep a low profile, the warden suggests forgetting this misunderstanding by pressing Henson's most precious possession, pointing to his sick sister. He immediately realizes his mistake and is frightened by the guy's behavior, who pounded his fist firmly and loudly on the chief's desk, but expressed his gratitude to him for all he hoped never to see him again. Warden Park didn't expect this kind of behavior and didn't think Henson was capable of it, as well as co-workers who were frightened by the anger, but respected his courage as he left the office. With a pleasant sense of victory after being fired and finding a chance for a good income, he headed to the computer club. In it, he went to the cashier and asked about payment. He told him the system required you to pay for the capsules before the start and for the PC after. He chose to sit down at the computer to study the game in more detail. Sitting down at one of the computers, he enthusiastically began searching for the information he needed. At the moment, the first place in this game is ranker at the 350th level, while the others are at the 100th level. So, the items that increase their level are the most popular, but the higher the level, the harder it is to increase it, especially after the 100th level. There are ranks of different levels, and the higher the rank, the more experience is needed for promotion. For promotion with Henson's rank, you need 5 times more experience. It will be tough to level up with divine rank, and it's cooler than the others. However, they also write that if you use your skills well, the high rank is much stronger, because otherwise it would not be possible. After Henson finds out, he goes to the cashier to inquire about the capsule. Looks at the time and reserves the capsule until the end of his workday, 10 hours. It's pretty expensive, and Henson agrees, having to pay for his own place. Then it gets into the capsule and heads off into the game world, determined. He finds himself back in the same village, in the house where he stayed the previous morning. Realizing that he knows nothing about his character's skills, he begins to study the available characteristics and abilities. Henson has the class descendant of Thanatos, the god of death and sleep, who was known as the strongest of the gods. He loves sleep and enjoys pranks. There is not enough information for Henson, and he takes to studying him in more detail. But it all sounds pretty good now that no god could resist him. Henson goes into the skill book, where he sees that he already has as many as 5 grand. Specifically, the Thanatos narcolepsy passive skill at its maximum level. This means that he can fall asleep at any time once a day, but when he does, his stats will randomly increase by 1. The next skill is Thanatos Dreams, which means that dreams will earn BS that can be spent in the BS store. The BS store is a place where you can buy skills or items of different ranks once a month, which are not lost when you lose. When attacking, the first level lunatism skill will be activated. During sleep, the AI will control the character, allowing them to not be afraid to fall asleep during the battle. Skill Nightmares of Thanatos increases attack power by 200% and will allow you to use any weapon and replace the skills of its possession. Deadly Rest is a skill that allows you to put your opponent to sleep for 1 minute and inflict increased damage. Based on all of this, Henson wouldn't be surprised to be called a cheater, but combat skills and having to buy them. He suddenly activated the narcolepsy skill and had to fall asleep, but he could leave the game. The countdown of the time after which he will be forcibly thrown out of the game has begun, although he is conscious but can do nothing. After leaving the game, Henson was unable to receive a refund for the time he had not spent, which disappointed him, because he only played for 12 minutes before activating the skill. As he left the computer club, he resented the unpleasant situation. He didn't realize he could sleep so long with narcolepsy. The rehabilitation hospital where Hyuna is being treated. She exercises on a special support machine and trains her muscles with the help of her doctor. After the training, the doctor informs Hyuna that it is no longer related to the psychological theme, which Hyuna agrees with, thinking that the idea is the key. Dr. Mina, a psychology professor, attributes her success to her brother, who helps and patiently waits for her improvement. Hyuna agrees with the professor's words because she is really trying hard to please Henson. As Mina serves coffee, she wonders when she will decide to tell her brother the truth about her paying for her treatment, which he is unaware of. Hyuna once tried to tell him that she was making money in the game, but he paid no attention, so she decided to put the conversation on hold. Mena supports the dialogue and says that today it is already the norm to make money this way. Realizing this, Hyuna hasn't told him yet because she wants to shock him and because she finds it very amusing. Agreeing, the professor would also like to see Henson's face when he learns this fantastic news. Hyuna offers the option of filming his face on his phone and sending it to Mina. Still, she laughingly refuses, saying it's not worth going that far. When the conversation is suddenly interrupted by a call from Hyunit's brother, who doesn't usually call at this hour due to work. When Henson returned, I didn't see her home, so I decided to call her and ask if everything was okay and if she needed to be picked up. Hyuna hides the fact that she is in the hospital and lies about going for a walk with her nurse, Ajuma. Exhaling, she says she'll go out more now that she's not alone since her brother believes her story. Henson offers to take her back, but Henson is angry at the hyperbole again and says she can handle it on her own. Mina mentally notes her brother's interest. After the conversation, Hyuna hurried home before she could have coffee with the professor so her brother would miss her. Leaving and saying goodbye to Mina, she called Ajuma and asked her to pick her up from the hospital. The professor looks down on the relationship between Henson and Hyuna. Ajuma takes the girl away. Hyuna decides to warn her in advance about what she told her brother to avoid a divergent story. The caregiver supported Hyuna's idea and agreed to her terms and conditions. From the hospital, they hurried home in good spirits. Where Henson was waiting for them, he informed them that he would be home and let Ajuma go home to rest, as she didn't have many free days. Hyuna wonders if she's been burned by the situation, trying to figure out if her brother is mad at her. Caregiver Ajuma says goodbye to Hyuna, who thanks her in return for the excellent care she has provided. Henson grabs his sister and carries her to her room. Hyuna tries to understand why he came home, thinking it was because she was in the hospital, and he found out and is now angry with her. Because he's not sick, or maybe something happened at work. Meanwhile, Henson had already brought her back to her room and put her to bed. He then sat down on the bed of the surprised girl and asked what he wanted to say to her. Very worried about her sister's reaction, he tells her he quit his job. Hyuna wonders why. Despite the highly challenging nature of his work, he never complained of fatigue, and he was also overworking. Henson goes on to say that he will now make money through the idea game, although it may seem sudden. Hyuna's glowing at those words, and she can't believe what she's hearing. Henson didn't expect such a strong reaction from his sister, as she had wanted to offer it to him for a long time. Excitedly, he begins to clarify details about his character, offering her help since she's been playing for a while. Hyuna is already in the top 1,000 and has long wanted to share the news with her brother. She also talks about the earnings she uses to pay for her own medical treatment. Henson is dumbfounded and asks her to elaborate on this moment, but Hyuna doesn't think about what she said. Starts to come in from afar, remembering the moment when she had already tried to talk about it even though Henson was asking about the cost of treatment. She pretends she didn't realize it, but her brother shows the seriousness of his question and makes her tell. He was upset that his sister had kept it from him, but she felt sorry for Henson because he didn't spend anything on himself and worked hard, so she decided to pay her own expenses. Her brother appreciated her intentions and made sure she was an adult. He told her that he was just starting out, had played games in his youth, and would ask for some advice, to which Hyuna grinningly agreed. Henson decides to make a bet with his sister that he'll be in the top 1,000 in 3 months, but he hides what his current class is. Out of resentment, Hyuna kept the truth from him and said he'd only tell if he couldn't get to the top. Hyuna, frustrated by this, warns him that it's not that easy and tells him that he will come back for advice in a month. Seriously intent on winning this bet, Henson walks out of his sister's room, but remembered his terrible narcolepsy skills and got a little nervous. Went straight to the pod to continue the game and not embarrass himself in front of his sister. Idea's game system reads the face of who enters the game and checks to see if Henson wants in. The landscape of this village, to which Henson has grown accustomed, is now time to change and go on to conquer the world. When he wakes up, he finds his stats have increased while he sleeps. He was aware of this skill function, but now he saw it with his own eyes. It's imposing, and Henson was very impressed and pleased because it's so convenient. He went to the center of the village to the gate leading to the training level. Before I went in, I remembered what my father said about making the first move being difficult. He opens the gate door and confirms his teleportation. A manual appears in front of him with instructions and rules, according to which he must destroy the scarecrow, for which he will be rewarded with a beginner's weapon. It turned out to be the same all around, and it didn't meet his expectations. He needs to choose a weapon, and it's best to choose something he knows how to use and understands how it works. Since Henson has a second Dan in Korean Kendo, he chooses the sword, even though he realizes that this world and the real world are different. When he played games in the past, he always chose and used the sword, so he has become skilled at it. The scarecrow had vague characteristics and looked relatively weak. Henson swung and, with all his might, split him in half, separating his arms. The mission is complete, and he's been rewarded with the new title of Rookie Monster. He also set a new record for the Nub Pro title effect, which he can share anonymously about. Now, he can go to any city. He's sure that if he doesn't talk about his accomplishments for a while, he'll be very shocked. Hyuna followed him and found out that he had a divine rank and was utterly shocked. Henson noticed that the effects of the Rookie Monster were even more pronounced despite its low rank. He also remembered that he had titles and decided to look them up. Everyone gave him such a long sleep that enhanced Henson's performance. Henson considers himself very lucky to have gotten them and went on his way. A map of the game world opens in front of him, and he must choose where he wants to go. Each server is on a different continent. He favored the city of Da, the most difficult of all possible cities for a novice. Since there's an orc village not far from it, they're impossible for a novice to handle, because these monsters are usually level 30 to 40. It's time to move up the ranks quickly, and for Henson, the best place to fight is where there's no one else. The entire city is enclosed by high stone walls, and the entrance is guarded by soldiers. There are two men named Hansen and Smith. They're standing at their post, talking about how long it's been since they've had a visit from a foreigner. The city is full of monsters with which it is difficult to cope. For example, the same acid slime, from which it is difficult to dodge and destroy a novice. Since his spit is fast and sudden, it melts gear and even hair after hitting the target. After reminiscing about it, Hansen asks Smith if that's not enough of a factor for him. Smith notes that the guard's mind decides not to bring up such a conversation again, when suddenly, their peace is disturbed by a sharp light descending from the sky, which they immediately recognize. This meant that the stranger had arrived in the city, and they peered beyond the gates with great curiosity, where a crowd of gawkers had already gathered, unable to believe their eyes, waiting to see the daredevil who had decided to visit them. Henson landed right in the center of the crowd, surprised by the excitement, and looked around, seeing only NPCs. But as soon as the townspeople saw him, they began to disperse, hoping that someone prepared and dignified would arrive. The guards were just as frustrated and worried about Henson because they thought he was a nub. He approached Smith, asking where the area with a monster-like appearance was. He warned him of the danger and advised him to stay away from the acid monsters. Henson told them not to worry about him because that's what he had come here for. Thanking him for the tip, he hurried into the forest while the guards shouted that it was hazardous for his life. Hansen sighs, disappointed that yet another inexperienced player will have to say goodbye to life foolishly, but Smith agrees to it. Rushing further and further into the woods, he had to slow down. Ahead of him, right on the road, he spotted the acid slime. He saw a core inside that he had to hit to destroy, but it was small. Henson went into action. He was not the least bit frightened by the dangerous spittle his opponent directed at him, deftly dodged it, and began to draw his sword to strike back. Aiming straight for the slime's mouth, he hits the core that needs to be destroyed, after which the monster is cut into many small pieces, signifying victory over it. It was very easy for Henson, but it's nice that he earned experience points. So he decided to go back to town and ask the guards where the orc village was. Hansen and Smith, having taken him for a lunatic, had not expected his return, nor had they anticipated such a question. Continuing to stand his ground, Hansen didn't expect such a strange reaction from them. He's still so young, and he shouldn't give up on life and cling to it, the guards kept telling Hansen. Out of pity, thinking they could keep us from doing something stupid, they offered to help. Giving him some of the gold they had, they again asked Hansen not to look for trouble. Hansen explained that he looked like his nephew, whom he loved very much. Smith advised him to buy a scroll to go to another city. Hansen, thanks to a generous gesture, gets the rare title of King Beggar because he didn't ask them for money and went on with his life. Walking through the woods, he pondered the situation. He is not a beggar. They may have told him not to give money, but now, if he needs it, he can ask for it. Relying on his instincts, he assumed that the orcs were farther into the forest than the acid slime was, and he would have to find them himself. As soon as he thought about how good it would be to guess the direction and find them, he steps into a large paw print in the road, which tells him he's in the right place. Hansen heard a noise in the bushes behind him and realized that the orcs were very close. Giant red monsters came out of the bushes, heading straight for him. They were scary and were going to take the life of anyone who strayed into their territory. Swinging at Hansen with a baton, they don't hit him as he deftly dodges the blow. Hansen pulls his sword out of its sheath and swiftly flies towards the orc to strike back, hitting one of them right in the neck. The other one looks at everything that has happened and decides to join the fight as well. But Hansen was already running toward him to finish him off. He also quickly dodges the baton of an orc who is just furious. And again, it strikes directly at the neck of the enormous red monster, leaving a trail of light and activating Thanatos' dream skill. This puts the orc on the run, but he can't escape Hansen, who raises his level with each blow. The two red monsters dissolve into thin air, signifying Hansen's victory in this fight. Not expecting that it will be so easy to level up, he decides to clear the entire orc village, even without skills, just as they were making their way awkwardly toward Hansen, who's already set his sights on free experience and easy BS. For a change of mood, a meme where a red orc's head was attached to a gopnik with a beer. The city of Da was situated at the foot of the mountains, surrounded by a forest. Guard. Hansen yawned and told Smith how bored he was with his post. He told me to shut up because he thought the quieter, the safer it would be for the town. After that, they noticed a strange movement just out of the forest and prepared to fight the red orcs. But it was Hansen returning from a battle in an orc village. In response to the guard's question about why he was there, Hansen said an embarrassed hello to them. Taking his embarrassment as an admission of their righteousness, they began to incite him for not listening to them. Still, they were glad that he had returned alive. The longer Hansen listened to them, the more his spirits sank, and he asked where he could sell what he had gotten. After dumping out a foot of orc skins, the guards were shocked and started counting how many monsters it had taken to defeat them. Asharashanife. The guards pointed out the directions to the store in an uncertain voice, and Hansen thanked them. Satisfied with his victory, he headed that way, hearing the guards behind him discussing what had happened and talking about the money they had given him. Hansen came to the thrift store that Hansen and Smith recommended. After greeting the owner, he explained the reason for his visit, to which he was ordered to put everything on the counter. He laid out one orc pelt, much to the surprise of the owner, who asked where he had gotten it. Replying that he had defeated about 50 orcs, he laid out all that had fallen out of them. Hansen was offered 150 gold pieces and a bonus for high-quality hides and bones, which he found pleasantly surprising, because that's 15,001 in the real world, and he earned it in half an hour. In a perfect mood, after taking the money, he leaves the store, saying goodbye to the owner. Walking down a city street, he muses about the original plan to focus on developing the character to earn money. And it turns out he doesn't have to because he can get paid for this. After that thought, I hurried past the guards to hunt for stronger monsters. Seeing Hansen's speed, Smith and Hansen assumed he was stronger than them and ran off to hunt the orcs, which was to their advantage. When Hansen heard this talk, he deliberately ran faster around them so they wouldn't demand a refund. And here he is again, fighting the red orcs, deftly dodging their blows. By striking back, he easily takes their lives while gaining experience. However, Hansen is growing bored with the easy prey and is liking the place less and less. The level, after 10 hours of game time, began to increase more slowly and dropped the usual drop, and he is not even close to the 100th level. The number of orcs is dwindling, and he wants to hunt stronger monsters, so he decides to return to the city. Since he has not yet met the boss around, which should be elite monsters to fight with, You need at least one attack skill. Henson decided to examine his characteristics because he wanted to use his skills more freely, which required more mana. So he allocated his points mostly to intelligence, then to agility, and then to strength and stamina. Then he goes to the BS store to buy skills, but decides to start with items instead. First, he buys a standard item to see what can fall out because only after the purchase can the player see what he got. When he opens the box, he discovers a steel-throwing dagger. After the usual, Henson decides to buy a rare item. He receives a ring with a bloodstone that enhances recovery and stamina. Henson liked the ring and immediately put it on, but now he fears that his luck will run out and no more good things will fall his way. Given the risks of failure, he decides to proceed with the unique item anyway. However, unfortunately this time, he was unlucky enough to obtain the Stick of Ayla, which only enhanced the strength of other weapons. Then, he gets to the heroic item, and again, he's out of luck. Drops Iris's first unlucky item, one of 7 that also cannot be used as a standalone weapon. Assuming it could be used later in some quest, Henson purchased the legendary item. And again, an item fell out that he can't use right now in battle. Namely, the egg and its unknown characteristics, description, and meaning. Henson, due to his excitement, fell into a stupor about the subject and decided to acquire what he had opened the store for, namely, skills. But while he was dealing with the BS magazine, an orc suddenly came out of the bushes behind him. He immediately vented his negativity from his failed shopping spree and beat it with one punch. Shaking off his hands after the fight, he decided to get back to the business of buying skills, planning to spend a lot of bees on them as he considered them essential. Henson again starts by acquiring the usual skill to go on a ramp-up. He gains the skill of running, which increases his speed by 10%. This option slightly upset him, as he wanted an attack skill, not this, and he decided to see what could fall out in the rare category. And then falls skill magic shot, which is also an attack and rare. Next, he buys a unique, Berserk's Song, but unfortunately, he is also an addition to the main one. Having gotten frustrated with the previous skill, Henson moves on to heroic, but gets the Siren's Seduction, so she can seduce every man within a 100-meter radius. It is an aggro skill that Henson considers a complete failure of bad luck and bullshit. But not giving up hope buys the legendary, and he's totally shocked to discover it's a real jackpot. Chains of God. They pierce any enemy defense within 30 meters and strike hard. Finally, the skill of attacking the area falls out, and Henson is pleased because it is a valuable skill. All this time, his actions have been closely monitored through a surveillance screen. Inferno, who created the game idea, is headquartered in Korea. Henson was being monitored by the user management group, where the general manager gets a report on everything. Manager Joe Minu was shocked and didn't expect such a success. What Henson is doing is crazy. How did the developers let this happen? He suggests adding Henson to the list of special interests to nominate to the central part of the list. Chominu doesn't understand how he only managed to get the divine class. Why did all the places go to Da City? His assistant suggests that to raise the level faster. The manager gets mad at the assistant's words as he realizes it himself and starts torturing him with his fingers in his temples. Another employee suddenly reports that user Henson has opened a BS store, thus distracting the manager from the bullying. With excitement, he runs up to it and is glad he finally opened it. Actually, Chomin didn't really care at first since Henson's level of control wasn't sick. It wasn't dangerous. It doesn't matter how good your class is if you can't control your character, but Henson moves incredibly well. His reaction is a fraction of a percent, so Joe Minu wouldn't be surprised if he were on the special interest list just for that. He doesn't understand how such a talented man started playing only now, given that he's doing impossible things. The entire idea game is controlled by artificial intelligence, and even the developer can't stop it. All he can do now against Henson is just pray and hope his luck turns against him. Cho Min to follow all the moments in the game, including the one where Henson fell off the stick. He rejoiced in this, as it is a useless yet unique item in the game. So his prayers work, and he continues. But when he next gets Iris's unfortunate item, the manager is very annoyed, because it can be considered basic and most important to Iris's quest. This means this quest now belongs to him, but Joe Minu is trying to calm down and watch. He's hoping that in the legendary class, he'll have a useless item like a staff again. But the egg that fell out of his mouth had everyone in a stupor. Even the group didn't know what it was or what it was for. However, since he can't use it right now, it's okay to exhale. Nevertheless, Joe Minu decides to ask the developers what it is. Next, they see that Henson is going to pick skills and pray for the bad ones to fall out. The manager is pleased that the first three were failures, as none were attacking. The fourth skill was Siren Seduction, which Cho Minu was highly enthusiastic about. But the fifth legendary one is Chains, which makes the manager feel so bad that the juice he drank recently starts coming back out, which drops on the head of one of his charges. But now Henson, with this skill set, will definitely be able to mop up the orc village. And after he kills the boss, he will be able to discover the hidden dungeon, said Chi Ming, wiping his mouth from the juice, and was terribly upset. He went to his superiors to report this terrible incident, and his charges wished him good luck. Once a month, legendary skills and items can be purchased from the BS store. However, now Henson will find it increasingly challenging to get BS as he progresses, and it's most effective when the narcolepsy skill is active. During its activation, lunatism causes his character to hunt independently and sleep more soundly on the hunting grounds. He remembered how morally difficult it was for him to work in the office, and how fortunate he felt that he had decided to quit. Currently, he has earned 100,000 won in less than 3 hours of real-time play at a low level. And then he wondered how much Hukna was making in the game. She's been playing for over a year, and is at level 331. Based on this, he may no longer worry about living expenses. Still, his big brother's conscience will not allow him to take money from his little sister. Henson's goal is still to reach the 300th level in 3 months, and he's ready to get started. So he goes into the heart of an orc village to take the life of their boss. When he got there, the village looked ominous, and there were a lot of red orcs. Hiding in the bushes, he looked out and didn't see their boss, trying to catch a glimpse of him. He only saw the red orc shaman emerge from his tent. But suddenly, he noticed the second one nearby, which meant the fight wouldn't be as easy as Henson thought it would be, since they were elite monsters. He activates the Lilac Seduction skill to stupefy all of the boss's subordinates. Red monsters just lose their heads, hoping there's a female around. A wonderful siren appears, and they mistake her for their own kind. Henson didn't expect this skill to have such a fantastic effect. But the red orcs look super crazy under his influence. Even the hero of the red monsters was struck down by Siren, and he, along with the rest of the crowd, ran towards her. Realizing it was the boss, Henson bravely confronted him and his entourage. The orcs run at him with their clubs, very angry because they've been tricked. But Henson uses his Chains of God skill and falls into the center of this snake of chains that, in a matter of seconds, kills all the orcs, which enables him to level up extremely fast, having defeated the red orc hero Kurak Chirik. For this, Henson receives 50 BS. The Secret Path map has 2 titles. With so many orcs attacking with so many items, it made him wonder how Huna was collecting all of this. The next day, Henson returned to the village, hoping to repeat his triumph, but the monsters were still not revived. And then he remembers the secret map he gets for defeating the head red orc, assuming she's the reason they're not showing up, and we need to clean out their hideout. So, Henson goes to the hidden dungeon he has discovered. When he reached the secret entrance to the dungeon, he found it too obvious. As he walked down the stairs, he thought about the fact that there are plenty of elite monsters that are stronger and smarter than normal monsters and can also use their skills. He finally reached the door that was the entrance to the secret red orc dungeon. Going in there, all he was thinking about was a nice rich drop and a quick level up. He was the discoverer, so the experience points gained will be doubled. There are vengeful warrior orc ghosts there because they have no physical body. They can't deal critical damage and will be halved. Henson's only skill besides the Chains of God is Magic Shot, so he won't have an easy time. When suddenly, on his way, he meets an orc warrior elite monster that is perfect for him to test his skills. He does a sword strike to the stomach, and as expected, the damage is halved if it's not a skill. After that, he decides to try out his Magic Shot to see if it works. Thanks to this, it finds one weak point and deals critical damage, as it is an attacking skill. But because it's not a weapon attack, Nightmare Thanatos won't activate. After dodging the orc's baton, he decides to use the magic bullet and again finds a weak spot, and deals with critical damage because it's a ghost. He resorts to tactics to hone his skills and identify the types of attacks to use against his opponent. Thanks to this, he defeats him and happily takes a lot of experience points from the losing orc. Thinking that there would be many more of these monsters, he would be able to level up well since he had already gained experience. At the same time, Huna, along with Ajuma, goes for another rehabilitation course as her brother is playing all the time. Ajuma wonders how enjoyable this game is that it can be played for so long. Hyuna confirms her words and jokingly suggests that she should also try to play her, which Ajuma refuses. For a moment, she'll wonder what Henson's level is now without realizing what his class is. But her thoughts are interrupted by schoolgirls laughing at the bus stop at which Hyuna glanced, and thought that if it hadn't been for the accident, she'd be talking about unimportant things with her girlfriends after school. But at least she met some good people in Idea with whom she is in a guild, and recently decided to share with them that her brother has started playing too. They were pleased about it and said to call him to play with them, but Hyuna would not tell him about the idea until he reached the 100th level. In class with Dr. Mina, she discusses the topic again and wonders when the brother and sister will play together. And Hyuna decides to tell the professor about the bet they made. But she hopes he loses because she's sure it's impossible. She starts swinging on the machine like a swing, thinking about what her brother will buy her after she loses, which Dr. Mina is not happy about. Hyuna also offered to play with her and help her if necessary, and she asked about her brother. But she's not going to help Henson for 3 months, and Mina's thinking of putting bipolar disorder on Hyuna's record. And Henson continues to easily defeat monsters on his way straight to the boss. Decides to double-check that at level 30 he's getting a class skill. Even though he realizes that some of the skills he has now will have limitations, he still hopes to get a good skill. He reaches the door, leading directly to the Red Orc mini-boss's room. The system asks if he wants in, to which he replies affirmatively. The doors with the glow open, and he walks boldly and decisively inside. And then the vengeful ghost of the orc shaman awakens and summons the orc warriors. That Henson didn't expect, and it's making him nervous. The vengeful ghost of an orc shaman, accompanied by his warriors, activates the skill of reinforcement, which increases their characteristics. Henson notices that the movement of the orcs is different now than it was on the last floor. He can easily deal with them using the skill Chains of God, but prefers to leave it for the main boss, as his abilities should be enough. The main problem for him now is the shaman, who is positioned behind the warriors and utilizes attack skills. Henson contemplated what would fall out of him when he sent him to the other side of the world. After these thoughts, he decides to use his skills against the orcs. After taking out all of the red shaman's guards, he went straight for him, but noticed that he could use fire and lightning to fight against him, and decides to taunt them, buying some time to see what attacks the orcs can still use. 5 minutes later, Henson realized they were getting rarer, which meant the shaman was running out of mana. So, he immediately decides to act and rushes right into the center of the battle. After defeating the orc warriors, the only one left alive is the mini-boss, and Henson attacks him. Orc shaman was destroyed, and the level increased rapidly again, as well as a lot of experience points. It was a hard-fought battle that took a long time, but Henson's health was almost entirely intact, and no valuable items came out of the awards. At least Henson has leveled up, and moreover, the main boss is still ahead. He is going to use the God Chains, and will be able to defeat him quickly. And finally, the big boss is ahead of him. He goes into the tall red gate. Upon entering, he is informed that there is a second level of the orc tomb, which is a little frustrating. You will likely need to defeat one more group of monsters before you get to the main orc boss. If Henson had known it would take so long to fight, he would have used the skill in the beginning, and he gushed at himself for wasting time he was held back by his stinginess. The user control room exists because time in the game and reality flow differently. Still, it can be accessed from the office. Chominu asks his very tired mentee how much time has passed, and he replies that in real life, it's 5 hours, but in idea, it's 25. The second ward joins the conversation, wondering if they're violating the Labor Standards Act, but realizes they're not. The manager asks them to concentrate on their work, and if they don't like something, they are encouraged to complain to someone higher up. They apologize. It's maddening that the game came out a year ago, and how can you only care about one player? However, general management ignores it, saying he's a year behind and not worth worrying about. The problem is one of them, namely the manager of the development team, Min Yura, who always talks with her back to the interlocutor. Only she cares about this writer because of the divine rank that no one was supposed to attain. It was created solely for the storyline. If Joe Minu weren't in the game, he wouldn't be in this department for long and would likely have been transferred to another department. However, it must be noted that the primary reason IDEA doesn't seek help from other companies is due to Minjura. The manager again asks if Henson is in the game, to which he replies that he is rapidly clearing the hidden dungeon of orcs. He also specifies that he defeated the mini-boss without using the God Chain skill. Apparently, he's saving his strength for the big boss, the assistant continues, which makes Joe Min feel bad because he realizes it's going to happen soon. But besides that, he's also expected to reach level 30 soon and get that skill. If it had been another user, it would have taken him at least a week, and Henson did it in one day. However, after level 30, it's hard to level up further. Many players call it the first hurdle. The manager is wondering how long it will take Henson to overcome that first hurdle. He hopes to stay as long as possible, but he realizes that the reward for completing the dungeon will be enormous. However, since he plays fair, there is no reason to stop him, and he decides to clear his mind, activating the skill to do so. After pure reason, Joe Min is straightforward in his thinking, which he's pleased about. Mount Para is part of the game where even the best marker has to sweat. Here is a desperate battle involving the Hyun Guild. Cyclops shoots at the ranchers from his eye, causing them to scatter in different directions. And then he swings his giant fist at one of them with all his might. But Rina courageously stops him with her sword, cutting him badly. The armored rancher acts next and hits the Cyclops right in the belly, which makes him cry out in pain and get even more aggressive with the company. Now, Sunny's exit, she informs everyone of this and approaches the enemy resolutely. When they hear the command, everyone around them retreats so Sunny can use her skill. Cyclops is not expecting such a turn of events, and she is bewildered. She does not repeat that he will act right in front of him now. Taking his magical staff in hand, he taps the ground, and everything starts to crumble, to form a huge rock cobble that rises up. With her Meteor Blast move, Sunny aims this rock directly at the Cyclops. Rina, with her speed skill, rushed to help her because, although her skill was strong, it was hardly enough to defeat her opponent. Rina assumed it only stunned him, so it turned out the stun would last him 5 seconds. At that point, she picks Sunny up from the battlefield. She quickly carries him away, commanding everyone else to hit him harder. The whole team starts aiming, activating their skills to win. All the blows go straight at Cyclops, who screams in pain and is sent to the afterlife. Everyone receives the achievement of increasing their stats by 10 for defeating a monster. After this, he was left with a massive mountain of items and gold that the whole guild was pleased about. Rina thanks the whole team for such good help with Cyclops, but Old Man Tank says she did most of the work, and you don't have to thank them. Sunny, lying in Rina's arms, joined in Old Man Tank's words. The gals also recognized the excellent work of Old Man Tank and Rina in this raid. But Kaiser remembered that if Hyuna had been with them, the fight would have been even easier, and they asked why she wasn't. A pissed-off Sunny said to stay away from poor Hyuna, and Old Man Tank went on to answer his question that she was in the hospital now, so she didn't come. Kaiser said he didn't know that, to which he was told that he should think before he spoke, and that it would be better if he kept quiet. Sunny remembered that Hyuna had mentioned that her brother had also started playing, and he would be joining their guild soon. She knows the rules and wouldn't skip raids, so Kaiser was wrong to point out her absence. The Guild of Heroes has only 7 members, but despite this, they are not inferior to other famous guilds. Her leader, Rin and Sunny, have a legendary class. Old Man Tank, Hyuna, and Statue have heroic classes. E and Kaiser are the lowest of all unique classes, and no one below this class, by the rules, is accepted into the guild. This is a small elite guild with only the best of the best few can join. Since they were talking about Henson, Rin would also like to invite her little sister to join their guild. She had only recently received a unique class, and for now, she should still practice before joining the continued Rin. Sunny enthusiastically began to tell her to apply quickly, and they would be happy to accept her, but she was only level 50. She achieved this result in a month, and I also noted that she is doing great and probably has good synchronization. Kaiser assumed that Rin was waiting for her to reach the 100th level, and then he would agree to take her in. On the same terms, Kaiser agreed to invite Sister Rin and Old Man Tank. Statue and I also agree, although I made the decision for her, it was the right one. Sunny jumped up from Rin's arms, just as she shouted that she was glad to see her sister in the guild, and Rin marveled that she was already healed. Rin thanked everyone for their hospitality, and said she wouldn't be logging into her account for the time being, to help your sister reach the required level in the game faster. After all, in idea, more ingredients than finished products are dropped during the hunt, so people create second accounts for production. Kaiser agreed that help from Rin's second account would be more useful to her sister, and Old Man Tank said that, for now, they wouldn't go raiding. The article and I got discouraged because they don't really like playing solo, but it can't be helped. Rin is pleased to have everyone's support since everyone is so lovely. After the conversation, they all clamored for a proposal to finally share the spoils. Rin then suggested that we return to the guild, to which everyone agreed. Sunny said goodbye to Sis Rin and told her that they would see each other later, to which she agreed. Rin thought about having to log into a second account after the move. Yen had said she'd be waiting for her in Riha City, she thought as she looked at the map. At this time, Henson defeated the Orc Knight and gained a lot of experience points. Who would have thought there would be 2 levels? And since he's earned the BS now, he can use the God Chains. Since he has sufficient health and is feeling well, he decides to go in right away rather than wait. The system warns him that once he enters the room, he can't leave until he defeats the boss. Henson agrees and continues to enter. The main boss of the orcs sits right in front of him, and he is his size. The room is huge, unlike the mini-boss room, because the boss is big and obviously needs a big room, even though he's more like an ogre. He was sleeping. Henson remembered that bosses usually have several phases and decided to pass the first one without using the Chains of God skill. The boss heard popping noises, which indicated that someone was in the room and immediately woke up. Henson's body trembled at the sudden roar of his awakening. However, he was not afraid and rushed forward boldly to attack his opponent. But suddenly, his vision began to blur, which activated narcolepsy. Since he was on the battlefield near the monster, it also activated lunacy. The manager, who had been watching his battle, shrieked with joy that it had finally happened. His subordinates also rejoiced at narcolepsy's absence at such a critical moment, and one of them suggested that now he wouldn't be able to defeat the boss. When another thought occurred, it was reported that during lunaticism, the character moves in the same way as when a real person is playing as them. Cho Minu agreed, but that wasn't his plan, so he wasn't upset when he heard the news. Because it is clear to anyone that with the skill of lunatism, he will easily defeat the orc and enter the second phase. Then, a subordinate asked him what he was so excited about, saying it was worth waiting for them to see for themselves. Finally, his prayers were answered, and something got in Henson's way. 20 minutes later, Henson defeated the monster Madkaraku. The group watched this awesome battle and noted his superior skills. It's impressive that he's completely used to them and one day will be able to do that. Henson is perfect. Although it was indeed an excellent victory, it was not the end of Zhou Minwu's plan. What happened next shocked the observing wards. There were a lot of valuable items in the game, but Henson didn't collect them, and just went back to sleep, even though there were a few rare ones, and they'll be gone soon. That's precisely what the manager was happy about, and that was the point of his plan and the theme of the prayers. Now, he feels much better. Henson could fight during lunatism, which means that after winning, O will continue to sleep again, and, more importantly, after clearing the dungeon, it restarts. The player is transported to the nearest town, which means they won't have time to return after waking up to pick up the items, and they will disappear. Very upset by the activated narcolepsy skill, Henson disconnects from the capsule and returns to the real world. Afterward, he wonders why he has such a name and what a regular game would require such a skill for. He decides to concentrate on the good, and for 40 hours of game time, it should pump up quite well. When suddenly his phone rings, it pulls him out of his thoughts in a way he didn't expect. It was his old friend from high school, Jae-won, who decided to ask him how he was doing. They arranged to meet because they hadn't seen each other in a while due to Henson's former job. His friend understood that because he had a sister to take care of besides his job, but he didn't understand why he decided to call. Jae-won decided to share the happy news that he had started his own business. After accepting congratulations from Henson, he said it was hard, but he got through it, and now he's working on the video. He decided to start with simple things, like editing the video of the idea game. Henson was immediately interested and started asking more about it from his friend. He explained that since the time is different there and here, it is not possible to stream, and he deals with already filmed videos. Many people need an editor for their material, but the problem is that decent specialists often work in large companies. Players submit videos there to create a decent product, as well as showcase the character's abilities. So Jae-won decided to create his own team of professional editors. Henson wondered if his friend would have a lot of work now and asked if any contracts had already been signed. He confirmed the thought about the amount of work, and they both drank to that. However, it's only been a day since the company was founded, and he hasn't begun searching for clients yet. Jae-won decided to change the subject and asked how Henson was doing because he couldn't just quit his job without a plan for the rest of his life. Henson was pleased to realize that his friend knew him well, and he decided to share the plan he had in mind for making money an idea. A surprised Jawan asked how long he had been playing and whether he planned to make a good living there. He didn't expect to hear that his friend had only a day's worth of playing time and decided to ask what class he was in. Henson knew he would ask this of him and decided to come clean, telling the truth about having a divine class. After which, a stunned Jawan takes another drink and asks what his level is. Assuming Henson answers that it's about the 30th, which his friend didn't expect because he's only been playing for one day. And it's only 8 hours in real time before he decides to make a serious offer. Realizing that Henson is a good player, he stands up and loudly announces that he wants to work with him. Henson was called to the pro league in high school, and now he's managed to get a divine rank, even though it's all in the past for him. Continuing his thought to convince his friend Jawan, he voices that YouTubers earn 10,000 per video. Henson, thinking that his friend was exaggerating, chuckled a little. Still, Jawan was serious about the fact that a good video brings in that kind of money a month. He says that he's already worked with a YouTuber who makes 100,000 won a month from his videos, which impresses Henson. He immediately and decisively pulls out a pen, asking where he should sign the contract. Then they stipulate that Henson's demands are for him to simply go in and start filming, send the files to Jawan, and he'll take care of everything. Sounds simple enough, and Henson has doubts about whether they'll make it, but his friend's words reassure him. Then he asks Jawan to take care of him, but he says that this is how they steal money from accounts, and you shouldn't say that to people. Trying to explain that he's trusting him, Henson suggests we split the profits. Because when he had no money, Jawan paid Hyuna's hospital bills, for which he's very grateful. That's why he's offering these terms. If he refuses, he won't work with him at all, so he agrees. When Jawan was in middle school, he was often bullied by teenagers because he was overweight. And Henson was the only one who talked to him and didn't pay any attention to this moment. So they decide to reconnect and do business together. Jawan will definitely not take half of the money and will not take anything at all out of gratitude for the past. After returning home from the meeting, Henson decides to look into videotaping. He plugs a flash drive into the capsule, hoping to watch the videos he has already shot. Then the menu opens, and he selects the video recording button. Of the listed steps, he clicks on the newest video recording of the hidden dungeon, hoping it will be interesting. He is surprised by the number of possible settings and recording functions and sends the video to a friend. At that point, Jawan had just gotten out of the shower and received a text. Sitting down at his computer, he decides to watch what Henson sent and rate the video. Opening the file, he was surprised that he even wanted to wear the mask, and he was interested. He started watching the footage and marveled at how fast Henson was taking down elite monsters. There was no unnecessary movement in the fight, and he may not even have had to mount anything. He decided to watch to the end and see the battle with the boss of the Red Orcs. But then something strange started happening on the tape, and the narcolepsy skill activated. After this, he immediately changed, and something strange happened to him. The mechanics remained similar, but the style became completely different. Henson moved very subtly and carefully, looking for weaknesses before attacking, thinking everything through, as if he has two personalities, one of a hunter and one of a knight. If the hunter went for the kill, the knight calmly smothered the enemy with attacks. In the video, the second phase of the monster orc has started to become more aggressive and more assertive. Jawan could directly sense this evil emanating from the boss, who had been stunned. The artificial intelligence controlling Henson's character decides to use the god chains. That flies straight into the orc boss's weak spot, causing him to scream in pain. Henson decisively pounces on Ponstra with his sword and hits him right in the throat while he screams for help. He easily defeats him right in front of John, who's just marveling at this fight. Henson wakes up in the morning and sees many messages from a friend praising the video, which amazes him, and immediately decides to call and discuss the whole thing over the phone, thinking the video was bad. He said Jawan shouldn't have sacrificed his sleep, but countered that the video was great and he'd never seen it before, not even when it was #1 in the game, saying he would definitely upload the video after he and his staff did the processing. Henson said not to rush him, since he probably had other things to do, but Jawan said he couldn't have anything more important than that. After this, he immediately wrote to his colleagues to discuss what he had seen, and they agreed with him. Henson and Hyuna were having breakfast, and she decided to ask her brother again, not just about rank, but if he said it, she would guess the class right away. Hyuna assumed he was, at the very least, unique, and his brother confirmed it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have quit his job. But she thought about the fact that he was probably a minimum heroic class, and could join their guild if he wanted to, of course. Rin's sister also rose in one day, and even though she helped, it was still swift. But Henson decided to answer the question about the level he had so far in his 30th year. Hyuna was very surprised at this, and her smiling brother didn't understand why she reacted like that. Namely, because she doesn't think it's possible to rise that fast in one day. Because he was in the beginning just yesterday, which Henson laughingly confirms. She continues the survey and asks if the brother has changed his grade on the first level, to which he also agrees. Hyuna looked at him, and Henson felt awkward, but she said she was impressed. After breakfast, he logged back into the game and realized he was in a city with many signs displaying text in front of him. But he decided to see what he got for yesterday's victory first. Without finding them, I assumed that items from the hidden dungeon could also be hidden in the menu. While he was looking for it, he read about increasing his characteristics by opening many windows, and passers-by gave him strange looks. But suddenly, he saw the inscriptions that the dungeon would now become normal, and he was advised to retrieve the items as quickly as possible before they disappeared. Frustrated, he sat down on the ground and thought about the fact that now his items would be gone, and he was in the city. I decided to reallocate my points to equip Iris's first unlucky item. Henson notices a new attack skill he's received, namely the Song of Thanatos. He doesn't use BS and MF, and he can safely use it at any time, which is perfect for him. Although clearing a hidden dungeon could yield an entire skill book. When he realized this, he quickly ran after her and was noticed by the city guards, who were just about to come up and ask for the money back. Along the way, he defeated one of the orcs, ordering him to give him a map to a hidden dungeon. After dealing with all the other orcs, he realized with horror that there was no map. And also, the secret passageway into it's gone. Instead, it's just rocky ground. Henson started laughing hysterically, which caused the townspeople to look at him strangely. How hard it was for him to stop laughing, which the guards also saw and decided they should forget about their money. However, at least Henson didn't lose his composure and should stay positive for that reason alone. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to get into the game within 24 hours. After calming down from laughing, he began to distribute characterization points. After enlarging them, he decided to try out Iris's first unsuccessful item. Deciding that he should just put it on the sword, he did so and waited to see what would happen. The sword changed its appearance to a green light, which Henson appreciated and put away. He decided he had to keep hunting and started to choose the next place to do it. Choosing the city of Reika, which was the hub of the 70s and 80s, he decided to go there and purchased a teleportation scroll. It went straight into the main square, and there were cries for help and pleas for mercy. Some were asking for a teleportation scroll, some were looking for a hunting party, and some were looking for a thief. Henson thought there wouldn't be many people here and wondered why it was so crowded. He felt that they should stop wasting time and go to the dungeon to hunt, so he hurriedly left to look for it before he was harassed. When he found it at the entrance, he was told he couldn't get in. These are Lycan's caves, and it takes a minimum of 3 people to enter. Once inside, he can't disband the group or leave while someone is still alive. Back in the town square again, he began to shout like the others who could be his team. Guild leader Rina enters the city, resentful of her situation with her sister, who wants to become a high-ranking player as soon as possible. And now they, too, must find someone to go with them into Lycan's cave. As she suddenly hears shouts about finding a team to do this, she starts looking around. Because strong twinks usually work with guild members, not solo, and she sees Henson yelling. But seeing the clothes he's wearing, she doubts his strength, and since she has no other choice, she decides to approach him. Asking him if he was looking for a team, Henson fell silent and turned around, not believing his ears. Rina reported that she and her partner were also looking for a team, and together, they would have just 3 people. Henson said he was alone, and Rina offered to go get her companion. After that, she introduced herself, and Henson also gave his name. Rina revealed that she and her little sister wanted to clean up the dungeon and then asked how long Henson planned to hunt at all. He was embarrassed and asked for the reason for the question. Rina felt embarrassed and apologized for being rude. She was wondering if he could still hunt with them, since he would need a team for further sweeps as well. Assuming Henson was around level 80 and not a tweener, it was perfect for her, and offered to continue the hunt with them further, and Henson realized afterward what the reason for the question was. With a warning and an apology, Rina said that she and her sister's levels were not very high, to which Henson said it's okay, and his level isn't great either, and he's the one who should be apologizing. They both thought it would be good to hunt together and see each other's skills. Gina is a fast warrior with 2 blades, so if they hunt, Henson may not be able to keep up with them, though that's a good thing. At that moment, Rina received a message from her younger sister asking how the search was going. But before going to the meeting, Henson said he'd like to buy a new sword. Rina told him where the best blacksmith in town was and said she'd wait for him here. Henson ran in that direction very quickly, which Rina was surprised to see because he was fast enough for a low level. He emphasizes speed too, and their hunting speed won't drop because of him. After returning from the blacksmith, Rina didn't notice any changes to the sword. She assumed he hadn't bought anything since he didn't like it. However, Henson bought a good sword, and perhaps he didn't change the look because of the equipped item on it. Having arranged to go, Rina informs me that her sister is at a cafe near them. They went to a cafe called Hafe Dobo, where the coffee smelled nice when they arrived. They immediately notice Ian, and Henson thinks that they're the same age as Hyuna, or even younger. However, age doesn't matter. It's a strength that counts, and Rina is clearly an experienced tween. They approach Gina, and Henson politely introduces himself with a nice smile. Gina also gives her name, and Henson concludes that she's probably the quiet one. Sitting down at the table, Rina begins to tell her sister about Henson and that they've agreed to get along for a long time, which she decides to do. She also reminds him once again that their level is low, but Yen says they have strong skills and can't be bothered. Henson also repeats that his level is not high and pretends that Gina is not quiet, but rather very confident, yet not arrogant. Instead, he senses her desire to develop and notices the differences in temperament and character between the sisters. Just like he and his little sister Hyuna don't look alike. Rina announces that she's about to throw an invitation to the team, which makes Henson a little nervous. He accepts the invitation, and a data window opens above his head. And the girls see his level at 35, and he didn't know it could be that high. He clarifies that he had warned them. The sisters are excited and angry, thinking they'll steamroll him in battle. Rina doesn't understand how he could move so fast with such a level, because she thought he was at least level 80. Because with those specs, he'd be pretty high class, but not heroic because he wouldn't give you that kind of speed. And most of all, his other characteristics are also strong. And perhaps he has a legendary class, pondered Rina. She has a great desire to hunt with this rancher, and her sister is not happy about it, and asks his sister, Rina, what they should do about it. Henson is feeling as bad and awkward as possible. He assumed he might be kicked out for being low, and decides to start a conversation about how the difference with Min is pretty big, but Rina says it's fine, because if he wants to get into the caves, he's got to have strong enough skills, as Henson confirms. He sighs in relief, while Rina thinks about checking on him, and Gina resigns herself to the fact that it's better than wasting more time looking. Henson thanks them for their acceptance and asks if he can record videos for YouTube. They're okay with it, and Henson says he's just getting started, the video is still being edited, and then gets up and suggests we go hunting, much to the surprise of the sisters. Henson doesn't understand why Rina and Gina are so confused and asks why they prolong this. Gina suggests that he has only recently started playing, but seems to have strong skills. Nevertheless, they agree to go now, but Henson makes the excuse that it's the first time he's ever been on a team and doesn't understand why they didn't want to go right away. The girls explain that usually before the performance, they study the features of the dungeon and monsters and conduct a briefing, but not always. After which, Henson thinks he wouldn't be interested in playing the pattern, and they head for the caves. The caves look pretty scary. Rina is ahead of us and leading the way. Rina arrives at the entrance and asks if everyone is ready to begin the mission, to which Henson agrees. When suddenly, Gina decides to suggest that he go into the caves first, although you can't say that to a teammate and Rina knows it. But despite her sister's reaction, she justifies it by saying she needs to assess the stranger's skills and abilities. If anything, they'll be helpful. However, saying something like that to a member of the group can make them angry because, often an idea, they try to eliminate one for profit. Rina reminds Gina of this, even though she's supposedly saying rational things. When suddenly, Henson doesn't hesitate to agree, surprising Rina. He thinks it would be bad if they couldn't trust him during the hunt because of his low level. It's fair enough that he'll show his abilities to the team first. Rina wanted to talk him out of the idea, but thought it might offend him and make him look like she didn't respect his abilities. Then Henson determined to go first into Lycan's cave, where no one had gone in a long time. Because of this, monsters awakened hungry and will be stronger by 20%. However, they will also experience twice as much, which pleased the entire team. Upon entering, Henson turns on the first-person video recording and chooses to wear a mask, which puzzled Ian, and she asked why, and Henson said it was his thing. Suddenly, they hear a growl and spot the first monster of the cave. Henson gets ready for the fight, which he calls a warm-up, and comes in closer. Seeing that it was a humanoid type, I assumed it would be a fun fight. Whereupon he swiftly leaps straight at the monster, forgetting his companions. And they didn't see it coming. Gina noticed that he hadn't even drawn his sword. In turn, Rina was impressed that he jumped straight at the monster and wasn't going to dodge. A little upset, Gina thought he would quickly leave, thinking she had been too harsh on him. But Henson manages to draw his sword and strikes right at the monster's belly. The stunned sisters didn't even think it was possible, especially from someone of a low social standing. It delivers a critical blow without even hitting his vital organs. That's why he notices a purple glowing ball of light appearing above the monster. Specifically, the Nightmare Charge. It orders the Thanatos song to go straight at the monster. Gina and Rina don't know what it is because they've never seen it before. The monster is surrounded by the darkness of this orb from the enemy. She makes him fall to his knees in front of Henson, who is about to finish him off. He strikes it with his sword and sends it to the other side of the world, thus defeating the Wolfman and gaining 1 BS. Given everything that has happened, Ian wonders how it's possible, and Rina can't believe her eyes because she doesn't think it's real, especially remembering his first move. Even though she saw it herself, the attack was so precise and clean it's hard to believe, even if he has a strong skill. Success depends on the user's control. She and her sister are wondering who this person even is, because even Rina wasn't sure if she could perform the moves like that on her main account, and now she had to recruit him into her guild. Henson understood how the Song of Thanatos worked and how to kill an enemy when they had little health left. Now he's confident that he's shown what he can do by defeating a level 80 monster in just 3 attacks. When Henson realized this, he exhaled, because now the real team hunt would begin. Up ahead, they spot 3 evil monsters coming right at them. Everyone is running toward them, but Henson is faster than the sisters behind him. This is very impressive to Rina since there are no effects around it, so its characteristics are evident. Gina has no intention of giving in to Henson and is trying to speed up to catch up with him. But he's already flying straight at the cave lichens, drawing his sword. He strikes again, activating Thanatos Nightmares, which causes the target to hallucinate and suffer pain for 5 seconds. Of the 4 monsters, and takes on all 3, dealing them a critical hit to a vital spot as well. And applying the effects of the skill begins to enable them to quickly and skillfully deal with each of them. Thanatos' song skill is activated and applied to all 3. The yen finally caught up with him, running as fast as it could. Seeing this picture of a confident Henson standing surrounded by monsters is very surprising. He strikes again with his sword, defeating them all at once. Gina sees this and thinks they aren't that far away, but how could he manage to overpower all 3 of them in that time? Rina finally runs after her, asking what had happened and where all the monsters had gone. However, Henson had already offered to move to another location after waiting for them. He starts running away again before the girls can even say anything to him. A puzzled Jaina and a joyful Rina agree, even though it's not required, and go straight after him. Henson, in his mask, overtakes them again, pulling firmly ahead, as he notices more monsters on his way. Now, there are 4 of them, but he still has 4 minutes left to recharge. He decides to test the performance of his new gear without using any augmentative skills and rushes into battle. In battle, he realizes that attacking by rotating his hips allows him to do more damage. Rare weapons are vastly superior to regular weapons. With this tactic, after defeating one, he takes on the second monster. But he blocks his attack with his arm, which puzzles Henson. But he immediately decides to use it as a counterattack. He uses it to attack with a sword aimed right at Lebanon's head from above and take him out. Suddenly behind him, he spots Gina, who finally catches up with him and starts a fight, and assesses with a glance her worthy fight with her twin blades. A little distracted, he forgot there was another monster right behind him. The system shows him that the werewolf is afraid, so he doesn't attack. Henson didn't know that monsters can be frightened too, so she promptly blows his head off and wins. A spear falls out of Lebanon, which Henson doesn't really need, but he takes it to sell. Gina turned to look at her again and watched her actions, but didn't dare to help her, so as not to offend her. She even uses her blades as shields and does twice as much damage, swinging them quickly, which defeats the werewolf very effectively and efficiently, according to Henson. He's also considering using 2 weapons at once, since Thanatos Nightmare covers all weapons, but decides not to, as there's no need to change his style of play. Just then, Rina comes running up and again doesn't understand what happened, to which Gina says she defeated 1 and Henson 3 monsters. When Henson sees Rina coming, he suggests we continue the hunt and move on. He runs away again, still convinced that the team is fun, and the sisters are puzzled. Gina assumes he's angry at her for her interference in the fight, which a confused Rina confirms. A fact that few people know, Rina's Heroes Guild is the only one to gain territory with only 7 members. And it was Castle Easton where Sunny was sitting at this very moment, sighing and thinking about how bored she was without her sister Rin. Because Kaiser is now on a hunting assignment. Old Man Tank's wife is pregnant. Rin helps her sister while Ai and Stuin work on their class assignments. She's thinking about tweaking her tweak too. It means taking a slight risk for in-game benefits. When suddenly, the room lights up, signaling the arrival of a new player. This entrant turns out to be Hyuna. She greets Sunny and walks over to her, and Sunny speeds over to her and hugs her when she asks about being late. When she suggests going to a cafe, she asks about Hyunu's business, and Hyunu tells her that because her brother quit his job, it's harder for her to hide it from him. Sitting down at the table, Sunny asks why her brother quit his job, to which Hyuna assumes that he got a good grade at the beginning since he had turned her down. And so she's trying to find out which one it is because it's so rare. Sunny is surprised, and Hyun goes on to say that he assumes he has a class above heroic. Otherwise, he wouldn't have quit such a good job and lost his income, and since he can now be a member of their guild. A surprised Sunny wonders about the skill because they are all professionals. Still, there may not be the right conditions for him. If he won't stand out because Rin's little sister's pretty strong too. But Hyun went on to explain that Henson had already reached level 30 in one day, which Sunny didn't believe. However, even though Henson likes to joke about it, he won't lie, and his reaction shows that he is telling the truth. Sunny said it's impossible, especially if you don't have good skills. She found it hard to believe, but if it were true, he was obviously more experienced than Sister Rin. Hyuna didn't expect to hear that about Sunny and was shocked. She asked me not to exaggerate even though Rin couldn't do that. And Sunny offered to call and ask her about it, and she liked the idea. Shouting with all her might, Sunny called Sister Rin on the line. But she was all out of breath and said she'd call back, yelling for Henson to wait for her. Sunny was very disappointed that she hadn't been able to communicate with Rin, but Hyuna backed her up and said they would be sure to ask next time, and offered to go hunting, which she agreed to do. While Rina and Gina were still trying to keep up with Henson, although they weren't very good at it. They received a notification from the system indicating that they had been running for a long time and that their speed had increased by 1. The girls were sure that Henson's behavior was due to his displeasure with them. And now there's a risk that Rina won't get recruited into her guild, which she's very upset about. Ignoring his lagging companions, Henson continued to run at top speed. Suddenly, a large number of dungeon monsters appeared in front of him. There were 11 of them, and he was determined to beat them all. The monsters also saw the enemy that had joined them and started running to meet them. Henson throws his blade at them right while running and hits the werewolf in the leg, and then decides to use the shot to beat them all at once. The bullets fly straight at the monsters and wound several of them in the arms, legs, and body. This makes them even more furious, and they just as quickly continue to approach him for revenge. Henson is happy about this and doesn't slow down in front of them, but runs right into their long, sharp claws, but confuses them by running right through their gangs, deciding not to touch them and focusing on the ones that didn't get hit, to hit the rest of them, and their health decreased as well. The monsters he'd bypassed were enraged at how this pathetic little man dared to ignore them. Now Henson's got werewolves coming at him from all directions, and he's in the center of the battlefield. But it was his plan to use the Thanatos song skill to throw everyone off balance, and with one beautiful, clear, sharp blow, blew everyone around him. He defeated 11 werewolves with a single attack and gained enough experience. However, Henson was expecting a lot more, as he could only raise 1 level. At this point, he has finally caught up with the girls, who are already exhausted. Henson felt embarrassed in front of them, thinking he had overdone it, and suggested they rest a bit before continuing, which they were pleased about. Gina indignantly thought about the fact that a guy with level 40 and Rina was even the head of the guild told her that. Henson reported that he thought the elite monsters were about to appear, and the sisters fell to the ground, no longer caring about their appearance at this point. But he wasn't resting, he was practicing his moves. And the sisters on the ground were amazed at how strong he was and wouldn't have agreed to that. They were ashamed that Henson was working while they rested, so they decided not to look at him and turned away. But he didn't care about them at all. He noticed that if you swing the sword a certain way, the blow becomes stronger. Then, I tried another trick and realized that in the game, you can perform actions that defy the laws of physics that exist in the real world. But from this overstretching of the body, he began to lose his health out of ignorance that it was possible. He was having a lot of fun with this workout and decided to try some more while the girls were resting. But Rina and Gina rose at this point, unable to bear the embarrassment, and declared the rest of their vacation over, even though Henson suggested they still rest. They reflected on the fact that he was the only one against their rest, and if they said they would rest some more, he would continue to exercise. So they will continue, to which Henson agreed and promised to reduce his traveling speed. They traveled on, and already at this rate, Gina was able to keep up with him. However, while they spent all their energy on speed, Henson decided to focus on improving his running. They thought he was mad at them again. Rina realized that Ian was still kind, and she felt ashamed of her sister for being angry at the slowness. While the girls were worrying about their own problems, Henson was only thinking about himself and how he could improve as a person, until they were faced with a new obstacle, a giant werewolf, who looked like he'd been to the gym and got a good workout. And with him adding 10 ordinary monsters to the mix, it's already going to be hard. This time, Henson decided to think about the girls, assuming they were bored, so he'd take the elite monster, and they'd take the rest. Rina started to act in order not to embarrass herself, and he wanted to join her guild. There was no way she could be weak. Gina started attacking as well. The werewolf shouted to Henson that the fool who swung his sword at the enemy had hit him right in the arm, after which he jumped back and used the skill to shoot straight into the monster's eye. The werewolf shouted that he was going to kill him, but Henson only grinned as if he hadn't wanted to do that to him before. His sarcastic phrase only made him angrier, and he roared, launching an attack on the rancher. Henson expected this reaction and threw his dagger straight toward the monster. But the werewolf notices this and manages to defend itself with its claws, which the blade easily bounces off of. While he was rejoicing, Henson slipped right behind his opponent's back and dealt critical damage with his sword. The werewolf decided he absolutely had to finish him off, looking over his back. But Henson is already about to use the Thanatos song skill and sends it straight at his opponent. Thanks to this, he defeats an elite werewolf and gains a lot of experience points, which raises his level. It's easier for him than he thought it would be, and now he's decided to see how the girls are doing. Gina quickly wielded her swords, and the more he looked at her, the cooler she seemed. And Rina was much more precise and accurate compared to her younger sister, so there was no need to worry about them. They were both good warriors. But Rina would occasionally slip, and it looked unnatural, as her control would be much better if she didn't. At this point, she felt that this account had an unusually low profile, but she just had to prove herself in front of Henson. The girls finally defeated the monsters and collapsed to the ground, exhausted. Gina was adamant that they would now take a proper break, and Rina supported her as they didn't have a healer and should get more rest. But when they heard Henson ask about the vacation, they tensed up. However, Henson agreed with the girls. Rina thought about the fact that these raids usually took frequent breaks, hoping that Henson wouldn't be practicing this time. But he also takes a vacation, which surprises the sisters. For Gina, he is incredible in both good and bad ways. When he suddenly receives a notification that the narcolepsy skill has been activated, what bad timing. He closes his eyes, then activates the lunatism skill, which remains in effect until the dungeon is cleared, and he mentally apologizes for it. He came out of the capsule terribly angry about what had happened. Still, he wouldn't be a burden to Rina and Gina because of the sleepwalking. However, after that, it's unlikely they'll want to continue hunting with him, and he won't be able to find a teammate, so he should probably hunt alone. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, everyone sits as if nothing had happened, because the sisters do not know about the existence of such a skill. As they suddenly notice that Henson has begun to fall asleep, Rina is happy to realize that he's a regular person. It's only logical that he would fall asleep. But all of a sudden, he gets up, and the girls don't know what's wrong or why he's acting like this. Yen thinks about the fact that it hasn't even been 30 seconds since they started resting, and he's already getting ready to leave. Rushing forward at top speed, Henson escapes further into the dungeon hunt, and the sisters have no choice but to follow him. Even though they were running fast enough to follow him, they were still far behind. On the way, they found things that had fallen from the monsters, and they were surprised that Henson hadn't collected them as usual. Yen W assumed he had run out of room in his inventory and offered to collect them for him. Rina agreed, and they went about their business, finding some rare items that had probably fallen from an elite monster. Gina thought it was strange because they could put out something they didn't need and take them away, so they decided to ask about it when they caught up. 10 hours of game time had passed, and 25 since entering the cave. The girls were exhausted and needed to rest. But seeing their level rise, they realized that Henson was still fighting, even though it was too much. When suddenly Gina noticed where they had finally reached, she called out to her sister. Before them was a very high door leading to the boss's room, before which Henson stood waiting for them. They became stumped, because it usually took 2 or 3 days to get there, not 1 day, and that was not normal. Gina cheered up a little at the thought of them setting a new record. But Rena was overcome with a strange and incomprehensible feeling. Moving closer, she apologized to Henson for their delay and for making them wait so long. But he didn't say anything. Rena thought he was angry and said that in return, they would give him the things they had collected on the way. Since all the bands were in place, Henson could enter Boss Service's room, from which it was impossible to leave at will. When the message from the system came through, the girls were very nervous because they weren't ready to go in, unlike Henson. Realizing that he was determined, they rushed over to stop him and explained that they were exhausted. Henson didn't listen and opened the door to the room as if he were going to handle the situation himself. But the girls were already sure they were going to lose, and it was the end for them. The real Henson was at home, and after comparing the facts, he realized that narcolepsy occurs when he's about to fight the boss. The most important thing is that after the cleanup, he'll go back to sleep and imagine his sister's reactions, and he'll be embarrassed to see them again. Since he was already out, he decided to look on the computer for places to hunt alone that were suitable for his 46th level. When suddenly, there was a call on his phone from a close friend, Jawan. Henson picked up the phone and, elated, said hello, but his friend's voice was exasperated. When asked about it, he said he hadn't slept in 2. Henson was surprised by that and asked how he was doing. Jawan replied that he wanted to sleep, but he would drink an energy drink and feel better. The latter advised him to rest. But he's doing it because he wants to and asks if Henson remembers beating the boss. According to him, the only strong monster he's ever dealt with was a vengeful orc shaman spirit. That could be what he means. He decides to find out who he's talking about, but it turns out Jaewon was referring to the Berserk Kraken. Henson didn't know there was a video of him. He didn't watch the video he sent because he was sure the narcolepsy skill wasn't recording. It was a little puzzling to Jaewon, but Henson said he simply didn't remember. Jaewon decided to explain that his game in the first and second parts of the video was completely different. So, he's considering introducing a specific concept. Henson asked again, and his friend thought he had some kind of problem with his head because he didn't remember it, and went on to explain the difference that the movements were different, that is, more readable. Normally, Henson would run like crazy to put his opponent on defense, but with the boss, he was more focused and precise. And it felt like he was listening to his opponent's breathing, recently taking no chances in cornering him. Henson had a hard time believing what he had heard about fighting this way. Then Jaewon got worried and asked if his friend had a problem with his head. Since the style was different, it felt like he had a split personality. Henson didn't like that at all and became angry, explaining that his lunacy skill had been activated and the AI was fighting instead. Jaewon didn't know such a skill existed and started asking more about it, but Henson didn't think it would be like this either. John grinned as he seriously thought he was crazy, but was glad he wasn't. However, I still asked how much of a difference there was in body control, and Henson said not much. He also wanted to ask to wear a white mask instead of black when the AI plays for him, like in the story of Jekyll and Hyde. However, Henson doesn't like the idea of being Hyde and feels resentful since Jekyll is the main character. Opening the video of his battle, he said he would think about the concept, and Jawan asked to be contacted later. Henson was a little uncomfortable watching the video of himself, but he was curious. He opens the video Jawan sent him, and there's a guy with a white mask on the cover. He's shocked to find himself unrecognizable, especially in a white mask he hadn't worn, and realized that Jawan is cocky since he had already changed the color of her to share his style and AI. Watching the video, he realized what his friend was talking about, and it turned out that his fighting style was completely different, making it worth taking an example from him. Although Henson learned a lot from hunting in a group, it's also worth exploring. Because of watching the artificial intelligence battle, he learned even more, and it all became even more interesting. Meanwhile, in the Cave of Lebanon, the team has already entered the boss's room, where he asks if they came here to disturb him. Henson stood masked, and behind him, Gina and Rena were terrified. Serbia went on to say that the courage of these guys amazes him, and don't let the humans think he lost his powers because he doesn't have a soul, and ran right up to them. The sisters were terrified and remarked that he was swift and it was hazardous. they would definitely end their days here. When suddenly, Cerbis started attacking Henson, which scared them even more. But Henson managed to block the attack by putting his sword in front of the monster's paw. Cerbis's brutal hit sent him flying far past Gina and Rena, and they realize they're in great danger, and they draw their weapons and prepare to fight. When suddenly, Henson's bullets come from behind them and hit the boss in the shoulder and back. This made him even more furious, as he thought it was a low blow and decided to eliminate him first. Henson swept past the girls and deftly dodged the werewolf's blow with his sword, stabbing it in the back, who also tries to strike with his long claws at Henson, but he professionally blocks the blow with his weapon, knocking the claws away. Then, he leaps at the werewolf with his feet and bounces off its shoulder, changing the orbit of his attack to deal damage. Gina and Rena are shocked at what is happening, carefully watching the fight continue because it is so artistic and amazing for Gina. Serbia is again bearing down on Henson, who is ready for his next reception. Dealing critical damage to the monster, and due to the massive shock, it will now be stunned for 10 seconds. During this time, it stabs Cerbis in the chest, thus activating the Thanatos Nightmare's skill. Now, he is cursed, and will experience hallucinations and pain for 5 seconds. The werewolf is angry, and threatens Henson that even when he tears him apart, he won't quench his anger. He rushes at his assailant, circling around him, leaving only flickering shadows in his wake. Right at that moment, Henson strikes his other shoulder with his sword. Then, Cerbis realizes that he no longer intends to experience those sensations after the skill. Still, he knows that it takes time to recharge. But then the skill attack flies at him again, which he did not expect based on his guesses. There must be a reason why he is so strong. But the werewolf is determined not to experience any more of the sensations Henson has condemned him to. And during the attack, he plans to defend himself so he doesn't get hit. As Henson unleashes another kind of attack, even though Serbia is faster than him, he can't fight through his blows. He notices that Henson is about to use the same skill again. He takes critical damage and will again experience hallucinations and pain for 5 seconds. The werewolf falls to his knees from this horrible sensation right in front of his opponent. He then realizes he's lost to an ordinary man, but he's not going to give up. The battle begins to heat up again, and the monster growls mercilessly at the enemy. Then howls and a black haze start to gather around him, and Ian and Rena are terrified. Cerbis is enraged and getting stronger, and the second phase of the boss fight begins. He flies straight at Henson, who barely dodges his massive claws. Gina notices that the monster's size and strength have increased, but its speed has decreased. Rena says it's Henson's control, and they wouldn't be able to do that. Henson thrusts his sword right into the werewolf's face without the slightest bit of fear. A lot of sharp objects flew right at him, causing slight damage. They suddenly start to break down due to the increased size of the Cerbis, and he swings at his opponent with all his might, trying to hit and destroy him. Henson suddenly uses the technique of scaring the monster away from himself again. For Rena, who was watching the fight, it was unbelievable and astonishing. Before attacking the monster, Henson jumped to dodge it. Then, used the shoulder for support to increase the distance of the jump and perform it with a somersault. Serbia tried to catch up to him and ran straight at him, running his claws along the ground that left marks on it. But Henson, confident in his strength and ability, also rushed toward him. Serbia saw him charge, but didn't use his skill, assuming it wouldn't work at a distance. He started to run away. Rena and Ian marveled at the speed of Henson, who ran past them like lightning. Rena immediately realized that this infected skill was Henson's trickery and deception. Because he hadn't planned to use it from the start, he just wanted to play with Cerbis's emotions, and he'd better back off. As expected of Henson, though, it's a marvelous plan, but his style of play is different. He's more refined, Rena says. Drive the enemy by exploiting their emotions and launching a surprise attack. This process is very different from what has come before. Henson has 2 distinctly different playstyles, and Rena definitely needs to recruit him into her guild now. Cerbis is diligently running away from his opponent, thinking he is much faster and wondering what Henson will do next, but then he stops. He's going to use another one of his skills called Deadly Peace. After spending $100 on it, and now he can't move for a minute. And the damage that will be done to it will double, but Cerbs can't do anything about it. And finally, Henson decides to use his most powerful skill, God Chains. They fly straight at the werewolf and do a lot of damage to him, and he realizes that he's finished. He turns out to be right and vanishes into thin air. At the same time, Henson defeats Cerbis. the werewolf who has lost his soul, and greatly increases his level. The team went through a dungeon that hadn't been cleared in a long time, and they were given the best items they could obtain. Gina and Rina are being promoted just as much, and they are pleasantly pleased with that. Henson reaches level 50. An exclusive quest is created for him for the descendants of Thanatos. The dungeon has been cleared, and the lunatism stops working, and Henson goes to bed. The sisters assume he's tired since he defeated the boss on his own. After looking at the treasure mountain, they agree to keep an eye on it until Henson wakes up, but it's not clear what to do with him. Gina offers to take him back to their hotel, but Rina is too much for her, and she backs out of the idea. Of course, the whole thing was monitored from Infento's headquarters. Cho Min asks his subordinate what level Henson's player is already at, and he replies that he's already at 53. After receiving this information, he urgently dials a number on his cell phone and calls someone claiming to be the head of the user team, Jo Min, who asks the reason for the call. The manager informs them about the level, and the manager sighs that they have not finished the preparations yet, and there is nothing to be done. And when asked how things are going in the Empire, Jo Min says it's still quiet, but soon they'll set up a research department. The Emperor, an iron-blooded monarch, could in no way stay in place, reports the caller and inquires about Henson's affairs related to the quest. Jo Min reports that he is now under the effects of narcolepsy and needs another 7 hours of real time for him to wake up. The voice on the phone says frustratedly that this will make it difficult to proceed, and Jo Min will think he should combine the information he's gathered. When Henson's class assignment in Vienna was unlocked, a giant castle appeared. Vienna is a city surrounded by water, modeled after Venice. It is one of the most popular cities due to its beauty and the presence of level 100 monsters. Iron-blooded monarch Heron will never leave the castle untouched, at least until he brings in a lord from a neighboring city to create a core. The main problem is Henson, as he must go there first, not the research core, to avoid problems, according to a voice on the phone. But for now, we should just wait and call him if anything happens, which Jo Min agrees to, and then hangs up. There's plenty of time for Rancor to sleep, but considering the state of the Empire, the most unpredictable is Heron Ironblood, the monarch of the city of Vienna. There have been countless people sentenced to 100 years in prison because of him, and there have been many complaints to the service department because of him. It'd have been better if he'd shown a little interest and sent the department through Lord Nakhod, and then had Henson get into the castle before they arrived. Because otherwise, something terrible might happen. After considering this, Jo Min decided to find out who the mayor of Vienna was. He turned out to be Drogon, one of the powerful merchants, evil and selfish, so he wouldn't be a problem. As he'd rather send users than his guard knights, then Henson can be faster because it takes time to find them. But that's only if Karen gives control to the mayor of Vienna rather than taking it over personally, because he might awaken the monster. That is sealed inside, namely the serpent Verona Aguilera, who was sealed there by Thanatos' apprentice and is now the worst raid boss ever. And if Heron doesn't kill the snake wyvern, the worst-case scenario will unfold, with the Empire collapsing due to the monster. Cho Min has no choice but to support Henson in the quest. Otherwise, the Korean server will receive numerous complaints which cannot be allowed. But suddenly, he notices that another rancher has received this quest, and she too has a class related to Thanatos. Although she doesn't have a divine class, she's powerful enough to be legendary, and she's going to that castle too. He mentally hoped that they could band together and prevent the monster's resurrection. Charon is the most powerful man on the continent, without exaggeration, and his trembling vassal came to him to break the news about a suspicious structure on the East Coast. Saying this, he realizes that if he suddenly says the wrong thing, it will not end with his neck alone, and many will be destroyed. He needs to focus. Listening to this and watching the vassal turn pale with fear, Heron thinks that he does not need such a servant and this information. The vassal apologizes in a shaky voice and tells the mayor to take care of it. Charon dismisses his subordinate, and the latter in turn thanks him for keeping him alive. He runs out of the hall so fast that even the shadow can't keep up with him. The monarch wonders why everyone is so afraid of him, even though he has never been cruel to the citizens, yet he has still become a tyrant to them. Although he showed no mercy to his enemies and gave no pardon to prisoners, he always emerged victorious in battles. However, all his subordinates are still trembling with fear, and even his guards, who are supposed to protect him, are afraid. If only someone would entertain him, and the palace is filled with those who are either afraid of him or too loyal. And the so-called travelers are all rude and not interesting people. If it were up to him, he'd secretly leave the palace and travel, but if he did, there'd be an uproar. Heron is sure the people will turn the place upside down to find him, and it will be a difficult task. However, it's not a bad idea to walk around and take a look at the new structure of Vienna out of curiosity. It would be boring because there were only level 100 monsters, and he wondered what to do. As he suddenly gets an idea for an event, he quickly rushes forward. It will be an event where every willing citizen, as well as travelers, can participate. And the point will be to fight. It will be a combat competition. Heron really hopes there will be someone interesting there, although going out for a walk is not a bad idea either. And the prize will be a job in his palace and a jewel from the treasury. He rushes off for a walk, and his subordinate says he has much to do. But it's not a prize for travelers because they're mostly selfish. Walking out of the throne room, Heron tries to think of what the addition to the treasure will be for them, and decides it will be any wish, because the winner can think of something unusual, and he will be an interesting person. The Imperial Combat Competition is a significant event on the Korean server that brings together individuals who want to establish their names. While pondering this, the Emperor picked up an additional gift, a large red stone. At this point, Henson was sitting at his computer analyzing the fight with Carrack, which was pretty boring for him. Because the only difference was the style of play and nothing else, that's a flaw in the narcolepsy skill. When he suddenly sees an ad for kendo classes on the internet, promoted by Idea, which said that the physical state of the body would affect your control of the character in the game, and for Henson, it had to be liked. He joined a gym, and is now going to find some kendo dojo classes. On his phone, he starts looking for ads for it and finds a practical martial arts academy right across the street from the gym. Arriving at the address, he sees a rather shabby banner and rings the doorbell. But no one opened it, so he decided to yell, and finally the knob jerked. The door opened, and a man with a very disgruntled face looked out. Henson was surprised by this, but first, he noticed his physique, specifically his muscles. The kind you can't get in the gym. You can only get them through wrestling. Despite the banner, he was sure he had gotten exactly where he wanted to go and said hello to the man, saying he had come to learn how to fight. He smiled and, noting Henson's keen eye, invited him in. A variety of training weapons were available in the room for use in the game, and the ceiling was high enough for easy practice with a spear or sword. The teacher asked if Henson had finished looking around, to which he replied that he liked the place very much. The master then instructed him to remove his clothes. This surprised Henson, but he had come here to study, not to look around. At the same time, the teacher took a long spear. Henson liked it and offered him a choice of weapons or using his fists. He chose a sword similar to the one he uses in Idea and decided to warm up with it, saying that he had practiced kendo in his youth. The teacher noticed that he moves well and has the talent to prove that he put in the effort. Henson said he was ready to get started, and they began their practice battle. The teacher puts the spear forward to see if the new student can block it, which Henson efficiently manages by knocking it away with his sword while running. The master realizes that he has enough strength to lunge with his sword without retreating backward or forward. He makes the right decision about attacking, because it's hard to fight against a spear with a weapon like his. Master throws a chopping leg kick, but Henson manages to keep his footing and stay on his feet. Then, he pokes the pointy end right into his chest, but he dodges again, deftly bending down and letting the tip of the weapon pass right under his back. At that moment, pointing his sword at his opponent startles him, and he jumps up. Henson manages to stand up and get back to the prepared position to counterattack. He's been out of practice too long and has run out of stamina. Smiling, the teacher thinks that the opponent's movements were excellent. At last, he has a worthy student. He calls a halt to the fight and says that, apart from increasing his stamina, Henson has done very well. He asks if he wants to learn anything else. He goes along with it and thinks that since he has accepted the role of Hyde, he should play it well. He said he wanted to learn how to operate 2 weapons at once. The teacher asked him to describe Henson's fighting style, to which he replied that it was like a rabid dog. It really made him laugh because he was playing aggressively, but he didn't really believe it. He suggested using the dagger as a secondary weapon of choice. He instructed me to observe and began to demonstrate different techniques, explaining how to apply them with a sword. Stopping, he threw the dagger right at the target and said that it would be a good idea to use it in battle that way too. Besides, the dagger is much faster than the sword and can be well supported with it, and it won't be a problem for Henson. They started practicing. While Henson honed his skills in reality, Rena tried to defeat the Moonwolf King in a game with the team. Standing right in front of him, she jumped up and swung her sword at him, dodging his attack, for which she easily won and earned experience points. However, she was disappointed that it wasn't happening. and until today, she remained too arrogant, recalling the Henson fight. If she ever meets him again, it would be great for her to recruit him into the guild so she can carry all of his items with her. She remembers the moment when he fell asleep, and she and Gina waited long enough for him to wake up. Finally, Gina couldn't stand it anymore and started waking him up on her own because she had to leave. When suddenly, a notification from the game appeared above him that he would be automatically expelled from the pack and moved to the nearest town. Whereupon he teleports right out of Ian's arms, but they agree to keep his things until a future meeting. And Rena decides to rush to find him after this flashback. Because if he's a YouTuber, she'll track his account, get his location, and then meet up with him again. If she wants to recruit him, she should become stronger. In these thoughts, she doesn't realize that she's already far away from Sunny and Hyuna and tells them not to hurry. She apologized and said she'd wait for them up front, which they didn't expect her to do. Hyuna asked a tired Sunny what had happened to Rena, but she didn't know. Getting out of bed, Henson felt his muscles sore from his workout. And I'd like to see what's new on the internet right now. When he opened the site, he saw that there was an active discussion about a new castle in Vienna and a public announcement about recruiting people to explore it for good money. Henson remembered that he had seen this town before, but he had ruled it off the list as it was too touristy, yet really beautiful. Then, I saw a negative discussion about a guild of superhumans who were close to the mayor and were doing crazy things to offend newbies. After realizing that the guild was comprised of toxic people, he thought he shouldn't care about them and decided to go to the gym while there was still time. After returning home, he noticed that no one was there and remembered his training and realized that since yesterday, he had been beaten by an old man. However, despite this, he has benefited as his movements have become more precise and his skills now align with his body. Then he decides it's worth checking out what he's learned and climbs into the idea capsule. When he enters the game, he realizes he's back in the main square of Rekka. He laughs to open the menu and see what has changed, and sees that his stats have increased evenly and have changed. The central square is a rather sad place for him because everyone is asking for something and offering to give everything they have in return. When suddenly, among the people, he notices a peddler of goods and thinks he will pay more money than in the shop, so Henson decides to approach him. After examining the items, he says he is ready to buy 32,450 gold pieces, which is equivalent to 3 million won, and this amount exceeds the shop's asking price. They say goodbye, and Henson goes on his way. Now, he needs to buy a teleportation scroll, which he must go to the shop to obtain. However, before that, he needs to deal with the notifications. When suddenly, the system informs him that he is already at level 50 and has unlocked an exclusive quest that he didn't expect to see so soon. It says that Henson needs to follow the trail to find the knowledge of Thanatos that one of his students must have. His first lead is to go to the castle in Vienna, where Aguilera is sealed, and investigate. And suppose someone discovers the trail before he does. In that case, he loses all his levels, which scares Henson greatly because he has only risen to the 53rd level. Angry about this quest, he decides he has to rush over there. And if he makes it in time, he can choose a divine skill or relic as promised in the rules. It sounds perfect, and he's bound to get them. Henson quickly sets off for Vienna in search of traces. Henson again finds himself in the central square of the city, but this time in Vienna, where there are a lot of people, and in comparison to Rek, it looks newer. He notices a crowd of guys discussing the research core, glad he hasn't gone yet. However, they notice him and start loudly discussing his appearance. Even though Henson admits they look good, he isn't very pleased about it. He realizes he looks like a simpleton with no equipment and ordinary beginner's clothes. Will thinks about the fact that he needs to get armor before meeting the core and for battles with opponents alone, and goes to the store. After changing his clothes, he spent 1,200,000 gold on plain leather armor, reassuring himself that he needed to make an investment. After he's finished with his uniform, he decides to go straight to the castle and heads there at full speed. The castle was farther away than he thought, and it would take 3 days to get there on horseback. However, since he was on foot, it would take longer. But he has an advantage over the research corps in that he went alone. He's only thinking about how he'll acquire the skill and the divine relic, and how much stronger he'll become. At this time, in the private residence of the mayor of Dorgnum, the great merchant is having a conversation with the guildmaster of the superhuman guild, Rainer. He's wondering how Reiner's research corps training is going, to which he replies that it's going very well with his help. Dorgny likes the way Rainer talks to him, as he's a good suck-up. However, his mayor is annoying, but he has to put up with it, and he still has to work with him for the sake of the money. Dorgnome says he entrusted him with orders from the Emperor himself to finish the Corps' recruitment as quickly as possible. Rainer reports back, saying that everything will be ready soon, and they will be on their way. After that, the mayor hands him something, which shocks Rainer. Taking it from his hands, he thanks, much to the chagrin of the narcissistic Dorgnome. It was the mark of a commander or knight of the Research Corps, the mark of the iron-blooded monarch Karen, by which he would dominate. The mayor goes on to say that he has high hopes for Rainer not to disappoint him or the Emperor. Saying sweet nothings in his face, Rainer thinks that if he does something wrong, he'll be thrown under the bus and bowed out. Even though it's humiliating for him, he must endure it to succeed Dorgnome as mayor of Vienna in the future. It'll take the Research Corps 10 days to reach the castle, and if Rainer's plan goes as planned, he'll be rich. At the exact moment, a huge, long line of those wishing to participate in the march gathered in Vienna's eastern square. Adolf, the manager of the Superhuman Guild, was sitting at the window, accepting applications for Corps membership. He asked about the level of all the suitable ones. Then he registered him in the records, assigning him a task with all the conditions clearly outlined. He was very bored on this mission, as only the members of the Guild of Lightmen would enter the castle anyway, and the rest would walk around. He was mad at Rainer for ordering him to sit around and hand out assignments, and he'd rather be hunting. Suddenly, he saw a beautiful girl standing before him. In the idea, you could only customize 10 types of appearance, and she was actually lovely. When she approached, he asked her name and grade, not just level, which seemed strange to the level 111th level Hanasio mage, but she named what was required and just endured for the sake of the quest. Adolf complimented the name and promised her that he would make sure she got a good role. She thanked him. Now, she needed to reach the castle and complete her personal quest assignment. She decided to ignore Adolphus, who seemed to her an abominable man. He became teary-eyed about wanting to be near her and called the next person in line. It was Henson, but he was wearing a mask, which surprised Adolf, and then he asked the level. But Henson replied informally, which made him angry, and he wanted to finish him off on the spot, but Rainer forbade any conflict. He restrained himself and silently gave the assignment, thinking that Henson would be better off leaving soon. He didn't even thank Adolphus for deciding to find and deal with him on the way to the castle. Henson sighed, thinking that if he hadn't gotten lost on the way to the castle, he wouldn't have had to take this assignment. He'd been running for 30 minutes, and he should have come straight here instead of wasting his time, which he'd only himself to blame. Manager Joe Min, who was watching, was just boiling with anger at what he had just seen. Because these two were so close, they simply passed each other by without getting to know one another. Because if Hannah and Henson worked together, things would go more smoothly. Yet, there is no doubt that he did not know of the connection between their classes because he wields the Reaper's chains. Their meeting was fated. Chomin yelled through this monitor screen at Henson about what he was doing as he could to let her go for nothing, rather than asking her to cooperate with him. Although, looking at it from Henson's point of view, he can't be sure she's not his enemy, and he's more cautious with his assumed subordinates. And since he's been overlooked, it's best to just walk away, as Henson's quest window doesn't mention Hanasio at all. The manager decided to check and realized that they had different assignments. Henson needed to find a trail, and Hannah needed to prevent Aguilera's resurrection. However, unfortunately, he can't influence the course of events and starts praying for everything to go according to plan. In front of the eastern entrance to Vienna, all those assigned to the mission have gathered to set out. Henson also stood among all these people and wondered how they could gather 1,000 people, but barely fit 100. Furthermore, the renowned Superhuman Guild is collaborating with other players and appears to have a well-coordinated plan. He should just be patient and reach the castle when suddenly he notices Adolphus ahead of him, looking at him intently. Thinking him petty, he realized it was because he was talking informally and seemed to be getting on his nerves. While Adolphus thinks how dare such a low-level shun him and look down on him and plans to massacre him in the night. He receives a notice from Rainer to order a search, so they sneak into the castle and take everything of value. Additionally, Rainer plans to reduce the number of participants and eliminate the other members of his guild. Adolf thought it was a good idea, but realized that if anything went wrong, Rainer would blame it on him while trying to find Hanasio. And once again, he catches Henson's eyes on him, and he starts to freak out. Henson has figured out his opponent's plan to attack him tonight, and now he's not going to just wait around. By evening, the people in the crowd had grown exhausted. They began to rest, allowing them 3 hours of real time to recuperate. That works out to 15 hours of playing time, and that's quite a long time for Henson to think. And the people around them start discussing whether they should get out of the game and piss off in reality so that they don't pass out from fatigue from the long walk. Henson was sitting at the campfire when suddenly he received a notification that his narcolepsy skill would not work until the quest was completed. Remembering that he is about to be attacked, he decides to take the enemy into the woods and go out there, which of course, Adolf notices that the victim is heading for his own sad end. He follows him out of the tree, wondering how Henson dared talk to him like that since he has a rare class, whereupon he abruptly jumps out and runs straight at him for a rear-end attack. Suddenly, he hears the sound of chains but doesn't notice them in Henson's hand, who has already turned around and noticed him. As suddenly as a Reaper chain attack flies at Adolphus, it wounds him directly throughout his entire body. Henson doesn't understand where they could have come from since they didn't belong to him, and he wasn't the one attacking. Adolf takes actual stun damage for 5 seconds, and his soul is chained, and he cannot resist for 10 seconds. A very shocked Henson has no idea what's going on right now. At this point, Adolf is sent to the other side of the world and will not be able to enter the game for 24 hours as punishment. Hana emerges from the darkness and says she followed him, just in case she didn't think he'd attack, and asks if Henson is okay. He didn't expect to see a woman with Reaper chains. He realized that her class was also related to Thanatos, and she had a legendary rank. Hanasio once again asks if he's all right, to which he replies that he is since he hasn't been attacked. She suggests we go somewhere safe because she's not sure if there's anyone else here. But Henson replies that he doesn't need to do anything else for him and thanks her for her help. He doesn't know if she's a friend or foe and decides to just leave. Left alone, Hana feels devastated at being rejected and doesn't understand why. At this time, in Infento, Chomin is furious at Henson for this act, although it was an obvious judgment on his part for the sake of caution, and on top of that, they have different assignments. Because he needs to find the trail of Thanatos' apprentice, and she needs to block Aquilior's resurrection. After this, manager Joe Min has a feeling that things are going to go wrong, and something sinister is brewing. Henson thought about how better than this woman, realizing he was going to hit the trail and then run away was the best thing he could do right now. Suddenly, a voice in the rancher's camp announces the end of the break. People are amazed that so little time has passed, realizing it's to remove those who have left the game. At this time, Henson realized that it was apparently because of the guy in the woods that everyone abruptly decided to finish the pass. Still, they wouldn't be able to find out that he had done it. After losing, Adolf exits the pod and calls the guild members to report the incident. He talks about the guy in the black mask and how he set him up by luring him into the woods and some ally they must have been up to something with. The subscriber goes into the capsule to sort it out for himself and tells him to hang up. Swearing at Adolf allows the user to connect to the game using eye recognition. He's asked what name he'd like to use to enter the game, and he chooses the name Rainer. After that, he opens the guild chat, and everyone is actively discussing the situation with Adolf and making suggestions to go in groups. In the crowd, he notices a guy in a black mask he's been told about and decides to watch him. Rainer resents Henson for messing with him because he won't let him get in the way of his plan. He will not leave those who try to take away his achievement alone. Hanasio reread her assignment and found it unclear since it didn't specify precisely how to stop Aquilior's resurrection. She doesn't like that she got such a bad assignment, but one thing she knows for sure is that she can't let people into the castle. At that moment, she notices that the one leading the group on the horse is looking at Henson and not taking his eyes off her. She realized it was Adolf's wish, and she felt guilty. She couldn't even warn Henson about it. Then she looked at him and guessed from his equipment that Henson was at least level 100, and he wouldn't be able to resist the guild anyway. However, it appears he has a spirit. He's still here, and she'll protect him because she's the reason he's under suspicion. Hana hopes that if she saves him again, he will be very grateful to her and believe that she is not the enemy. The group makes a halt again, although only 300 men are left after the last one, and that's quite a loss. They'd already gone 35 hours, that's 7 hours in real time, and it was worth a rest. So, Henson has decided to take a breather for at least 2 hours from the real world, but before that, he has to do something. He noticed a group of guys watching him, and it made him suspicious. He suggested it is a deliberate strategy as they're not hiding, but anyway, he doesn't care, and he demonstratively walks off into the woods so they can see him, and the company starts to follow him. Henson, for his part, decided to run at top speed and realized that they were all slower than him and therefore had slower reaction times. although they may be faking it, and if so, he respects their acting. Deciding to end it, he slows down, and the guys catch up to him. He overheard them talking about trying to figure out who his ally was and assumed they meant that woman. But with her skills, Hannah would never have been caught. But then he realizes that Adolf told them. He turns to them and says he screwed up when they thought it meant Henson was surrendering and asked him to turn in an ally. Henson realizes now is the best opportunity to attack them to test his new skills. Namely, wielding a dagger in his second hand and pulling out the weapon, he lunges straight at one of the company, inflicting Thanatos' nightmare with his next strike. He hallucinates for 5 seconds, and Henson runs at the rest of the enemy. He also wounds their bodies and hits a vital point with a critical blow. The first casualty shouts to the others to stop them from doing damage, as they will get an anomaly, which is just awful. At this point, Henson starts to adjust and decides to be more relaxed. Suddenly, one of the opponents flies at him and beckons him to pounce all at once. Does Henson have stealth class poison or a secret weapon in his other hand? Henson blocks this guy's blow with his sword too, and the guy doesn't understand why he's not attacking from the back. With another swing, he sends the bouncy ball user to the other side of the world. He received 3 BSs for it, which he didn't expect, but he loved it. He thinks it is a good idea to occasionally hunt down other players while fending off an attack from one of them. An arrow is fired at him, which he easily deflects by passing it over his shoulder, and then throws a dagger right into the eye of one of the guys. Henson inflicts damage on whoever is standing closer, and then runs at the distant opponent, who blocks his sword attack while protecting himself from damage and anomaly. But Henson manages to knock the sword out of his opponent's hands, who falls to the ground nearby. Then he runs past him, seeing another guy trying to attack him from behind. He throws his dagger at one of the company boys again, hitting him squarely in the ribcage. And finally, he decides to use the skill and fire little bullets. That flies right into the face of one of the opponents, who's pissed about it. Henson retakes the stock dagger and is glad he decided to take a bigger one. Then he blocks the axe blow on his sword again, which makes the guy very angry. He deals another critical strike and switches to the next attacker. He strikes with a dagger in his other hand, thanks to which he defeats the human warrior and Yaoso and gets 5 BS for the Thanatos Dream skill for each of them. He notices an arrow being shot at Neko, which, with a sharp movement, he cuts lengthwise into 2 pieces. The remaining opponents see this and scream that Henson is crazy. He says that's precisely what he's doing, and he kills them with 3 BS each. After the battle, the ranchers dropped a lot of valuable items and also received BS, which pleased Henson. In addition, he captured great footage for his video, especially that moment with the arrow, because at first, he was sorry he hadn't done it with the first one. He stops the recording to collect items and realizes that this could be a problem if he simply returns to the camp, as chaos will ensue. He also decides to finally take off his mask, because he hasn't had time to do it since he joined the Corps. He notices, among the items, a topographical map of Vienna with the castle's location marked. Usually, such things are held by the guildmaster, not the regular guild members, and notices are often found lying around. But thanks to them, he can now opt out of the Corps and hit the road on his own. So, he does, and decides he needs to rest, study, and eat in reality, and he gets out of the idea. Hana was watching and didn't realize what just happened. She couldn't believe that Henson was so good at fighting and had control, realizing that he wanted to do the same thing at that time. Namely, when he started tricking Adolf into the woods to kill him. She also noticed that he found a map among the items and then decided to quit the game. And Hana Salo was very curious about what would happen next. She decided to follow him, but she had to go out for a while too. Back in the game, Henson went to the castle, and on the way, he dealt with monsters in the woods. He used the Song of Thanatos again to bring victory and unleash the nightmares upon them, which earns him experience points, and he continues his journey to the castle. While running, he opened the map and assumed that the guildmaster must have known he had it. When suddenly he hears a sound next to him, he turns around to see what it is. But sees nothing, he decides he's just imagining things and moves on. It was Hana, who had been following him all this time, who was amazed that Henson had defeated the monsters in a couple of seconds when it usually took 5 minutes. He defeated them simply by passing them with skill, and apparently, he's a powerful user. Because his skill was at least heroic, maybe even legendary. His control is reasonable, so his class rank is high, and there's a chance he has a high-ranking class, which is why Hana wanted to recruit him. amazed by his weapon skills and how he can dodge monsters and collect items quickly. Based on that, Hanasego thinks Henson is just a great player. He sees again how he professionally dodged the boars just by jumping from above. Rainer is out of the game again, browsing the guild chat, and is terribly angry at everyone who didn't handle Henson. He accepts the fact that he's firm, and that's not even a bad thing. Now, he needs a break from the real world. He decides to bring a special group of fast guys with him to be the first to the castle, and then he falls asleep. And Henson's been running all this time, and it's been a day and a half in the game, and he hasn't even been able to step up. When suddenly, ahead of him, he notices the footprints of a newly formed group, even though it is obvious. They are moving as fast as he is, and they will be met before they reach the castle, and the tracks show them to be 5 to 10 men. But if they're a grade lower than Henson, they should be fine as long as they're not above the 200 level. Because the quest does not accumulate karma points, now is the best time to fight, and the higher the user's level, the more BS they will receive. Even though Henson doesn't receive experience points, that way you can obtain good items and lots of BS. Additionally, PvP videos are currently very popular. Finally, up ahead, he sees a campfire and realizes he's found the guild that left the tracks. There were 5 of them, and judging by their equipment, it appears that they're all above level 150, which is significantly higher than Henson's. And there could be one with a 200 level, and still Henson decides to attack. Based on their position, they should be direct subordinates of the guildmaster, and they are definitely stronger than those 5 from the core. But Henson's already got a battle planned, and he's not going to back down. Because if nothing changes, he's going to win this fight for sure. The guild members were discussing how strong Henson was, but one of them noted that he could also take on 5 people at once. They think the others are making up that he cut the arrow in 2, and they're probably just ashamed that the 5 of them were defeated by 1 man. Because Guildmaster Rainer is capable enough but a coward, and they just want to pass the shift quickly and go to bed. They suddenly notice the effect of the skill, but there should be no monsters nearby that use them. Henson put a spell on them, and within 10 seconds, they would rush to the skilled performer. They didn't realize what was happening, and since their bodies were moving on their own, they couldn't use their combat skills. It was at that moment that Henson jumped out of the bushes at them, ready to attack, dealing critical damage to everyone. Then they put a nightmare on them for 5 seconds, and now they'll be hallucinating and in pain. After this, he used the small bullet skill to reduce his health, just hitting each of them, wounding their body, causing them to take critical damage and stun for 3 seconds. So he took out all but one of the strongest. He strikes again and wins with 100 BS, and since he had 100 more levels, Henson's stats increased by 20. Suddenly, he notices that Rainer has arrived with his 5-man team. Rainer, noticing that 5 more fighters are missing, becomes furious and yells out where Henson is, as small bullets fly out of the bushes from the guildmaster. Then inflicts a warning hooray on the pack, and now they become opponents. No one can get out of the game. Rainer keeps yelling for Henson to come out, and he thinks they won't find him, but now they can't leave idea. But since there's no aging after 5 minutes, combat mode is cancelled, and they don't understand why Henson isn't attacking. When he suddenly does warning damage again, the mode activates again. Rainer is furious and yells that if Henson is the man, he'll come out fighting, even though he can do it all night. But then 5 minutes pass, and he's gone, which confuses the guys in the pack. After 10 minutes of silence, the guildmaster loses his temper and berates Henson with every word possible. And he does decide to come out of the bushes and show himself by drawing his sword. The only thing on the members' minds is to get rid of this man who has been taunting them. But Henson has a different plan and puts a nightmare on them with a skill and easily defeats them. This means that the guildmaster will now be unable to connect to the game for 5 days. He collects the dropped items and realizes he can take his time. The only obstacle he has left is that woman, Hanaseo. But maybe she's loaded because she doesn't have a porter, so he doesn't have to worry about her and decides to get out. In the morning, he has breakfast with Hyuna, who looks very tired. She explains that since yesterday, her guildmaster has been hunting at breakneck speed and she can't keep up. Henson remarks that she likes hunting, which Hyuna denies, saying she used to be more concerned with safety and suddenly changed. Henson thinks to himself that his sister is whining, but apparently she had fun and likes her guildmaster. He listens to her story about the guild and asks if there are a lot of people there. Hyuna replies that there aren't many, and apparently he's interested, which is a good sign. This surprises Henson because it's challenging to run a neighborhood with a small number of people, and his sister notes that not all guilds share the same goals, and that everyone is unique. Of course, some guilds block entry to dungeons for others, but they also cannot last long. And there are such unicums, but more guilds like theirs that just like to play for fun. Usually, the whole guild gets together for a raid, or when they encounter a high-level dungeon, but other than that, they travel and socialize. After Huin's story, they decide to ask his brother to join them, but he says he's not strong enough and he doesn't want to be a burden to them. He has no plans to join his sister's guild at the moment. He is developing himself, after which he gets up and leaves for training. It upsets Hyuna because she almost convinced him to join them. As Henson packs up, he thinks about how he wants to be worthy of his sister so she won't be ashamed of him in front of her friends. But before he leaves the room, he looks at the pod and is sad that he can't use the footage from last night's battle. God at 5 was better than with the guild's direct subordinates. And since he started using the dagger, everything will look different. He remembers the part about cutting the arrow and sends the video to Jawan. At the gym on Henson, he works out on the treadmill to boost his stamina but suddenly notices people discussing on the screen. Regarding the research core, hundreds of users at the 100th level have gathered in Vienna. But the guild of superhumans that ran everything committed atrocities, and people were interested. The man with dark hair explained that when the guild became known, it received public anger from many users. The guild of superhumans was entrusted with leadership. Still, they deliberately threw people in the way when they should have been guiding them. To Henson, this whole discussion felt like he was telling his own story. The man continued the story, explaining that they couldn't find the guild master and his subordinates among the research corps, and the people wanted to go by themselves in groups. Due to this, a large number of guild members have also left the corps, as other users will not leave them alone. The girl was very outraged by the stories. She said that even in a game, controlling and manipulating people is horrible. Henson wasn't worried about the guild, as he was more concerned about Hanaseo. He didn't know if she had received the card or not, and whether she was an enemy or a friend. He needed to be first. Watching the videos Jawan sent in, he sees that the fighting style is not chivalrous. It looks rough, but it's effective, and it features a lot of violence on top of that. He was shocked by what he saw and realized that Henson had already adapted to the game. Turning his head to his colleagues, Jawan announced that a new video had been released. Everyone said it was crazy and that it was going to be the #1 show. A subordinate asked Chief Jawan how many energy drinks to buy, and he said to start with a case of each. Henson came again to Teacher Huen, who looked at the skills and noticed his speed and stamina growing. He was sure that, in addition to his workouts, Henson was also engaging in basic physical training, and his learning curve was commendable. On top of that, his determined face shows he's an absolute monster, even excluding his subjects. However, Huen decided not to mention it to him and continued practicing the battle instead. With this spear, he could pierce it, and no one had mastered it as quickly as Huen. Henson's abilities are unbelievable. He fights his teacher bravely. He would firmly repel an attack or professionally dodge them with his own blows. When suddenly, Huen decides to stop practicing because he notices that Helson's palms are cut. He calls him into the master's room to examine the wound and offer assistance. Looking at his palms, Henson realizes that, in reality, it feels completely different and is fun for him. Teacher Huen bandaged his palms and treated the wound to stop the bleeding. Henson thanked him for that and told him he would be coming to practice the next day, which caused him to yell at him to give the wound time to heal and rest. But he insisted and said it was better to let them turn into blisters sooner, to which the master agreed. And then Henson would come tomorrow since he hadn't had this kind of pain in a long time. It was wrong, but Huen couldn't say anything back. Henson said goodbye and also thanked the teacher for his hard work. When they got home, they all sat down to dinner, and Helson decided to discuss YouTube, asking for ideas on what to name the channel. He said Jawan decided to take the case and told him to think of a nickname, but he couldn't come up with anything. Huyn asks what the concept of the video is, to which Henson replies that he has two styles of play completely opposite of each other. Like Jekyll and Hyde, I can't think of anything to fit the theme, and everyone's thinking the same. After a while, Ajuma offers an option like Asura, and explains that this god is an old cartoon character who was half man and half woman, multi-armed and three-headed. She thinks it's perfect for everyone, and it sounds pretty cool. Including Henson likes it and embraces the name idea. He enters the idea again because the guildmaster can enter it at about 3 o'clock, and he has to head to the castle to make it. Before heading out, Henson decides to warm up even though he's in a virtual world. Opening the map, he realizes that the castle is still a long way away, and the journey could take another 2 days. After completing his exercises and stretching, he decides to hit the road immediately. But suddenly, he hears a yell behind him and turns around. It's Hanaseo, the woman, and she says he can't go. She looked furious, unlike before, and Henson didn't understand how she knew he'd be there. She said again that he wouldn't pass, and Henson didn't see it coming, so he got worried. Hana had been watching him and his battles all this time. She couldn't believe her eyes. She guessed that his class was highly ranked, given his control and skill, and even watched him take out Rainer and his guild. He watched Henson play cat and mouse with them and marveled, having goosebumps run down her back. And when he came out, she was saddened, even though she realized he was clearly tired from defeating all the superhumans. And I decided to go out for about an hour and a half, hoping to keep up with him. When Hana returned, she found no trace of him anywhere and decided that he had not returned yet, so she waited. She sat in a tree and thought that even if she missed him, it was okay because she had the search skill. But she'd be sorry to miss any battle, so she decided to wait for him here. But he hasn't shown up after 10 game hours or 20 game hours, and even 30 hours later, he hasn't logged on. Hana figured he was asleep. She realized they hadn't set a time to meet, and he wasn't late, so she decided to wait a little longer. Starting to get angry, she thought about why Henson was still gone, believing it had been 2.5 game days or 40 hours of real time. When she finally saw him reappear in the clearing, he'd disappeared from. Quickly jumping down from the tree, she decided to go and talk to him because she couldn't take it anymore. Hana came up behind him and shouted angrily and loudly to Henson that he wasn't going anywhere. That surprised Henson, and he wondered how long she'd been there since he'd seen no signs of surveillance, and she wasn't so simple. She's hardly Rainer's pawn, or he wouldn't be alive anymore, but he should speak properly because it could cost him dearly. Because he wants a unique bounty and no longer cares about levels, he won't give it to anyone. At this moment, Hana was also pondering what she had said. She just wanted to observe his fighting style some more, but she couldn't fail the task. And, of course, Infento's headquarters is watching. Covered in sweat from excitement, Manager Chominu sincerely did not understand why they still hadn't formed a team and gone to the castle together. Henson decided to ask again what the woman in front of him meant, but the woman just wanted to be honest and couldn't think of anything else to say. She decided to come from afar and said she was on a mission not to let anyone into the castle, although it wasn't a lie, but it wasn't true either. Henson, for his part, knew she was hiding something, but he knew her motive, and replied that he knew what her rear end was, specifically related to the Aquilior wyvern. Not expecting this from Henson, Hana was very embarrassed and didn't know how to react. She was confused, though Henson thought it would be a little more complicated. But he knew right away when Hana protected him from Adolf in the woods and told her about it, which puzzled her. He decided to show what he was talking about and fired a Reaper chain right at one of the monsters behind Hana's back. Told her he had one too, but she didn't understand how that was possible because only one can have a legendary class. However, he can suddenly replicate his abilities, which is his strength. Nevertheless, that doesn't explain how he knows about the snake in Thanatos. Henson decided to reveal that his assignment is also castle-related, and that he needs to go there. He also has a legendary class. Wondering if it was even possible, Hana decided to take his word for it. But for all she knew, Thanatos was the strongest god of the idea world, and maybe he could let the two have a legendary class. To prove his point and demonstrate that he has a mission, Henson shows a map he has already memorized by heart. But if she takes the map from him, she'll get there first. He said it's from superhumans. He also admitted that he lured this guy into the woods to kill him on purpose, but thanked him for his help. Henson realized she hadn't answered anything and decided to be careful about talking about such things. But Hana said she already knew that, and the map of Vienna and Adolf. And, of course, the fact that it was Henson who defeated the 5-man squad, and then their reinforcements. Now he guessed that she had been stalking him for a long time and had just confessed to it openly and was definitely hiding something. He also decided to be honest and apologized for the harassment from the moment he got his card. Decided that their assignments were similar, Hana forgave him, to which Henson replied that he was not sure about it because their roles were different. She pointed out that Henson was correct and stated that her goal was to prevent Aquilior's resurrection, which proved difficult because the mission didn't specify how to achieve it. In response to the openness, Henson also showed his assignment, which detailed everything. And yet, they have different assignments, but they share the same mad skills, with a few active and many passive. It all boils down to Hanaseo. She was talking too fast, so Henson believed her, and she asked if he had any difficulties like she did. He had to talk about how there's a sleep skill that always activates at the wrong time and only a couple of attack abilities. And apparently, since Thanatos is the god of sleep, the skills also sleep like him. Hana also agreed with this speculation. Henson and Hana believed each other as it turned out, since they had so much in common. At first, he thought she was not telling him the truth or was lying, but she was sincere when she told him. So gullible it's a shame, but it's a good thing she's not the enemy, Henson thought. But it would still be better to keep his divine class a secret for safety's sake, he decided. Henson, a descendant of Thanatos, realized that he was in charge and Hana was his subordinate, so he was weaker and not worth eliminating. But he should still be wary, he thought, as the girl continued to complain about her game. Henson remembered that he had forgotten to introduce himself and gave his name, just as Hana did after him. Henson explained that it's his public persona for his YouTube channel, and he's so accustomed to it that he doesn't notice it. He doesn't need a pretty face to attract an audience. Thanks to his skillfulness, Hanaseo reflected, and said he was okay with it, as I didn't expect Henson to make the decision to take off his mask. He was handsome in her eyes and had excellent control and skill. Hana thought it was unfair to have it all at once. Embarrassed by the look on her face, Henson asked what was wrong, but she turned away and said nothing was wrong and blushed. And finally, they decided to go to the castle together because they shared a similar mission. Henson decided to offer Hana a run, and she agreed. While running, she thought about the fact that Henson was very handsome and strong, which would make him a success even if he didn't take off his mask. He was surprised at Hana's speed and glad that, at last, there was someone who could keep up with him without difficulty. She was trying to keep thoughts of him away from her. And then he decides to try and outrun her to show he's stronger than the girl. However, Henson doesn't make it, and her opponent takes the lead, even though she hadn't intended to do so and was thinking of sending a friend request. Unable to find a reason, she just decides to pitch the idea to Henson's surprise. And Hana's trying to hide the fact that she doesn't want to do it. It's just that it would be better not to lose each other in the castle, and she doesn't want to be on the team. And, of course, Henson is okay with that and says he's going to throw in a friend request and shake hands, and they become friends. After a while, they reached a castle that stood on a high mountain. Looking at him, Henson thought he was bigger than expected, and Hana was worried that, after 25 hours of running, he wasn't the least bit tired. She also thought that he would be one of the best players in the world, and she should have done her best too. They got closer, and there was a virtual wall to get through. They tried to do it, but Hana couldn't get through and just crashed into her while Henson calmly overcame her. After the collision, Hana received notifications that she couldn't enter until the mission was complete and was instructed to guard it. She decided to ask Henson if he'd gotten any notices, and he said yes. Specifically, the ones that said that only a descendant of Thanatos could enter and would have to pass the Apostles' test to discover the trace. And if he fails, Aviurna will be resurrected. He thought he had already reached level 50 at the beginning, but he decided not to tell Hana. And she realized he was the reason for the lock and told Henson. This place had more to do with him than with her, and in fact, the whole castle appeared for his sake and his assignment, explained Hana. She told Henson to check in while she guarded the castle against Rainer in case he arrived, as the notice had stated. Henson agreed with this explanation and went into the castle, leaving Hana near the barrier. Annoyed that he hadn't said anything to her before he left, she pulled out her braid and began to transform, chasing away those evil thoughts. She's not going to stop him, and she doesn't want to think about it, but if he doesn't come back, he's in trouble. By activating her sanctity skill, she changes her clothes and has wings. And then she taps her scythe on the ground to summon the demons. Demons rise up from the ground and head toward her, surrounding the castle. And now, anyone who ventures into this place will be sent to the afterlife. That's the order she gives to her subordinates. Hana gets goosebumps every time she uses it, and her hair stands up, though it's really not a bad skill. As she stands on guard, she remembers Henson, and what if he doesn't pass the test, or doesn't thank her upon her return for what she did? Entering the castle, Henson sees a massive statue of a dragon 100 meters high and realizes that it is the wyvern Aquilior. She looks pretty intimidating and suddenly lets out a growl from her mouth. Frightened, Henson draws his sword and dagger ready for battle. But Wyvern didn't move, and he thought she had heard him and was angry that he had called her that. All the stats went up by 5 just from looking at it, and now Henson is wondering just how strong this snake is. Suddenly, a table with a desk appears in front of him, and he doesn't understand where it came from or why. He receives notifications that the first stage of the test is starting, and he must solve the proposed tasks. With each wrong answer, the difficulty increases, and you have 1 hour to complete it all. Henson realizes that this is really an exam with questions looking at the sheet on the table. He sits down at the table, takes a pen, and starts studying. Already at the first question, he doesn't know what to answer and skips it. All the questions were about Thanatos and his apostle, and he decided not to answer any of them because he didn't know the answers and preferred complex tasks. 10 minutes before the end, he realized that he should have read the texts better instead of just thinking about leveling up. It turned out that the story was quite crucial in the game, and now he regretted accepting this quest instead of fulfilling someone else's assignment. When time ran out, Henson was already preparing to be penalized for his focus on levels. However, the system announced the tally, showing that all the answers were incorrect, and now the highest difficulty level will be activated. The Wyvern Doppelganger activated, marking the start of the final stage of the test, where Henson had to survive for an hour. Aquilior's eye flashed red, and she began to move slowly, time picking up her pace. It was only at that moment that Henson realized he'd maxed out the monster's power. She stomped her foot, breaking the floor beneath her, and Henson had to hope she didn't trample him in one fell swoop. She screamed furiously, but fortunately, her roar had no effect. And yet Henson's body shook with fear at the sight of her without it. The wyvern started smashing everything around it, and Henson just tried to run away so it wouldn't hit him. This means he didn't get a scratch, but due to the avatar's shocked state, his stamina was reduced, and he chose to brew just more dodge, and his equipment and weapons moved into inventory to stay out of the way. He felt insecure without it all and decided to spend all his skill points on agility. He also bought the elixir just in case, and didn't think he'd drink it now. When I noticed that the monster also had enormous wings, waving, which picks up a strong wind and impedes Henson's movements. Bamboozling her all over the castle, Henson decided to see how much time he had left, and as it turned out, it was simply only 5 minutes and an hour. But thank goodness it leaves behind wreckage he can hide in to catch his breath. Henson looked at the wyvern and realized that it was becoming increasingly difficult to dodge as it anticipated his movements, when suddenly he sees a burning ball of fire gathering in the mouth of the serpent that's about to fly right at him. He uses the siren's call skill to confuse and distract her, and at that moment, he runs out of his hiding place and rushes away from her. However, it didn't do much good, and the monster breathed long tongues of flame out of its mouth. It's crazy for Henson because he didn't think she could breathe fire. He managed to dodge in time and stood there watching as the entire castle hall went up in flames with just one exhalation. Henson realized that Wyvern was designed solely for destruction, and it was entirely his fault. He thought it was impossible to beat her at this level of difficulty. And Henson, full of anger, decides to act rather than just dodge. He uses the Thanatos Nightmare skill and pulls out a dagger, throwing it at her. Still, unfortunately, it just bounces off, making strange noises. It surprises Henson because he doesn't realize if the damage is accumulating at all, when suddenly Wyvern starts screaming in pain from the blow, making Henson realize that his attacks are working and that he should have tried them earlier. He pulls all his gear and weapons out of his inventory again, determined to fight, then turns on the video recording and reapplies the Nightmare of Thanatos skill to the monster. Then, it inflicts critical damage, hallucinations, and pain for 1 second because of the significant difference in levels. Everyone in the Inferno office was worried about this battle, realizing that if Henson failed, nothing could save the Korean server. Even with a special unit, he couldn't defeat a wyvern because of their low level. And even the NPCs wouldn't be able to do anything against the monster, and it's all awful. Joe Min is distraught, but Henson applies the siren's call, which forces Wyvern to open up, which means he's not a miss. They also see Reiner using a blade and a magical fire projectile in the full knowledge that it won't work. However, it all takes its toll on the monster, and manager Cho Min is starting to believe that Henson will win. The helper says he has a lot of chansons, though the clone is not much weaker than the real Snake and is almost impossible to defeat. Still, something's got to come out of him, so it's really worth hoping for Henson. Cho Min realizes that this will be the highest difficulty level, which is now in the game. And now he's hoping Henson won't make it, because the items and skills dropped from the Wyvern shouldn't be available this early in the game. Joe Min wants him to continue dodging her and not torture his nerves. While Henson has already realized that his attacks are coming through and has no intention of backing down, he realizes it's just a doppelganger, and if it were real, he wouldn't be able to defeat it. Bouncing higher, he continues to look for weaknesses or vital areas in the wyvern, and realizes that she's not as dangerous in close combat because of her build. She's so clumsy that she has to attack right under your nose. Henson uses the Thanatos Nightmare again, causing the monster to suffer pain and hallucinations. However, she wasn't stunned because of the significant difference in levels, and the duration was reduced to half a second. But he keeps going and attacks the wyvern's neck by jumping higher. So he finds one very vulnerable spot that's hard to reach because the snake is constantly moving. He hits him right on top of him, causing a critical blow as he hits the vital point several times. But it looks like she's not going to give up just yet, so we're going to have to hold off. This is the 8th time Henson has used the Thanatos Nightmare skill, and she is still alive. And then he decides to check the time, and there are only 10 minutes left. He uses the Siren's Call skill again to open the wyvern's mouth, which then exhales a huge flame of fire, aiming straight at Henson. But he dodges and is notified that Wyvern will only be active for a minute, for which he is immune to all adverse effects. Watching them, Henson realizes he'll never get another chance to fight her, and he applies the skill of Song of Thanatos. At the same time, she hibernates, which cancels immunity and doubles the damage from attacks for a minute. Suddenly, Henson sees again that she is about to charge with a fiery flame he would surely lose. When suddenly it fades, he doesn't waste any time jumping right to her head, and applies the Reaper Chains, causing her to spew flames again. She exhales fire from which Henson is safely out. Thanks to this, he uses his skill, Song of Berserk, which gives you the ability to attack many enemies at once and increases strength by 50%. And with it, he flies right into the wyvern's mouth to try the attack. Now, 2 adversaries face off, and there can only be one left. Henson slides the sword promo into a weak spot and finds himself standing on the wyvern's face. He enjoys the victory because he would have been gone in a second. Thinking that it was pure luck, Henson realized that as you level up, your skills also become stronger. He also concluded that he urgently needed to acquire evasive skills. After his triumphant victory, he wonders what fell out of a monster with such a significant difference in levels. He reached level 60, increased his stats by 30, and unlocked the skill Thanatos Collection, then went to collect drops. After moving to the Apostle's room, he saw him right in front of him. He said hello to Henson, calling him his god, and was very happy to meet him. The Apostle began to explain that he was only here because he had defeated him with attacks instead of avoiding him, and would have gone into another room and gained power. But that was the last thing he expected from a descendant of Thanatos, so he was won over by Henson's stubbornness and bravery. But all those words didn't sound good to Henson because it sounded like he was slinging mud at him. The Apostle went on to discuss excellence and said that it was too early to present as there were a couple more assignments to complete. He's just a hologram and can't see the rankers, but he can tell that Henson is pissed at him for the test he's about to give, which will yield the correct answers. Henson was already boiling over at how boring the Apostle was. Still, he consoled himself that he would get his revenge when he met him in person. He's been offered a choice between power or relic, and when he finds the first trace, he can choose one of the powers. And the power he doesn't choose now to get later, so it's better to choose the one that's more useful now. The first power was Call of Thanatos, which, when activated, defeated all living creatures within a 100-kilometer radius. But it won't earn experience points, which is a disadvantage for Henson. But as soon as he saw the second option, he decided in favor of the first. At this time, Joe Min looked and thought that even the most skilled ranker would take more than a year to accomplish this, considering there were items and a skill book to acquire simultaneously. But it's for the best. Now he'll be able to handle the real wyvern. Now, I wonder what kind of authorities he'll get. He chose Call of Thanatos, and I don't know why because it was really a disadvantage. Now, there's a risk it may stop growing in levels due to this issue. When suddenly the manager saw something strange and couldn't believe his eyes. Why, exactly? That was the question on his mind, but at least now he wouldn't be able to raise levels at wild speed. Although Henson's problem is not in levels, if he acquires this skill, it will not affect anything until his level is higher than 100th. And eventually, he would reach levels faster, and it was all very challenging for manager Chi Min. He decides to go to the bosses, and on the way, the developer's mentees feel sorry for him because of all the skills he had caught that he should not have. Namely, Thanatos' Conscious Dream, which, when activated, takes away 1 level, and the defense becomes 0. Henson realized that he would get half as many experience points, and it would be harder for him to level up. But there was one thing. Now, Instead of 24 days, he will only have to wait 12 days and will be able to visit the BS store more often. Apostle also said Henson made the right choice, and it would be great to see him at the 100th level. And, as a reminder, please note that this castle will disappear underground in a minute, and I'll say goodbye. As Henson fled, he cursed the Apostle and vowed to deal with him when they met. He managed to run out of the castle at the last moment, where Hanaseo was already waiting for him. He noticed her change in appearance, and she thought he'd failed the assignment. Since the castle was missing, she asked Henson about it, and he said it looked like the Apostle made it. Henson didn't think Hana knew about the Apostle either, and forgave him about it, to which she replied that she had seen him too. When she suddenly received a notification that she'd passed a task, she wondered what she'd earned for it. She opened with full enthusiasm to see what the ball skills were expecting to see, hoping to see something good. But after being disappointed, she realized she wasn't as cool as she thought she was. She decided to ask Henson what he had gotten and what had fallen out of the monster, and he just said he was happy with what he had. Although he forgot to look at what he had, he opened the inventory and saw the legendary skill book, then went to look at the other items. There were Boots' Desert Mirage that added speed and opened the skill Mirage similar to evasion as you create a double. Also got the Dream Belt, which gives you reaction speed and can impose hallucination effects, as well as the Ring of Killian, which allows you to deal 100% more damage when using magic skills. And of course, the legendary item Serpent Heart, which must be eaten to increase the power of magic and intelligence, is not eaten under Soa. There was also a book of Dragon Tongue skills that he could also use. Along with the book, Henson received the Dragon Tongue skill, which ignores the recharge time but halves the power of magic. She realizes from the look on Henson's face that he's a lot luckier with the award, after which they decided to say goodbye and thanked each other for their help. Henson teleported away, and Hannah was sorry they were breaking up, but she added him as a friend. And she was also sad because Henson had better bait than she did. She has the Alarm Clock skill, which allows her to wake up an ally while retaining all effects. She didn't understand the point of it, and she didn't even want to play because of the nonsense that always fell out. At this time, Henson had already arrived in Vienna and checked into a hotel on the central square. He sat on his bed and thought about what had happened, remembering that he had the heart of the serpent. He took it out and looked at the glistening ball, but didn't immediately dare to eat it. But he had to do it anyway. He took it to the genus and it tasted like caramel, and he got the effects, after which he decided to put on a dream belt that also sparkled. Well, and of course, in addition to it, Need and Boots' Desert Mirage now have risen in levels, doubling stamina and magic. Then he thought he could shoot magic balls left and right, and everyone would think he was a mage if they saw him in battle. As he plopped down on the bed, he decided he would spend 25 points on stamina and use the rest on strength. And now he needed a proper rest after such adventures. Henson decided to meet up with Jawan, who had also been up all night. He said he'd take the day off today and sleep in because he'd made the video with a couple of days to spare. And he may have already published the video Henson sent, as it's short and very intense. Jawan then asks if Henson has already come up with a nickname for himself, and he says, yes, it's short and sonorous. When he heard it was Asura, the three-headed god, he was a little surprised. This was the character from the Manhwa, and Jawan remembered who it was about and liked the idea because it fit the theme and was short. After that, they began discussing videos, deciding which ones to publish and which ones to exclude. Additionally, they raised the topic of the caregiver being paid more. Although Henson is worried about his friend, who has worked so hard on the video and should now have taken something out, he says not to worry about it. And he thought he'd give the video of the last fight later, so he wouldn't deprive his friend of his vacation days. However, Jawan demanded more and said it would be great to have Henson record everything he did if he were there. And he jokingly said it was his video, and he'd only send what he wanted. So Jawan shouldn't expect much video since Henson is too much of a perfectionist and asked for video from the hunt. He promised to send it and asked where Henson was in the game, and he said Vienna. It's a place where players level 100 and up on the hunt, and Jawan asked what level his friend was already at. He replied that it was the 74th, and he was not chasing numbers but just enjoying the game and the world of ideas. And Jawan asked if he was going to go out again soon, or fight with a bunch of people. To which Henson replies that he wants to play with friends and socialize with other players for the time being, as the solitude is already boring. His friend chuckled at that and told him to remember to record the video and send it to him. Henson became angry and said he wouldn't send anything because nothing else had happened, and they continued to argue. At this point, Raynor was in a bad place due to what had happened. The fact that he hadn't received his reward, and the fact that the superhuman guild had fallen apart. And now, he's a wanted man who can't log into the game, and he wants revenge on Henson for all of this, because he's ruined everything Raynor has worked so hard to achieve, and now he's going to pay for it. And then he's going to sell the capsule in case he runs out of money, but he's going to hold off on that for now, and decides to create a new account to evade detection. Now, he has a unique class, and he thinks Henson doesn't stand a chance. Meanwhile, in Vienna, Henson had already woken up after sleeping for 31 hours and had 36 BS thanks to double points. He gets out of bed and starts doing his morning warm-up and stretching exercises, then notices a new skill for reaching level 60, namely the Thanatos collection, which will give the ability to collect souls and exchange them for levels or 100 BS. This is not a bad skill for Henson, but for the divine class, it is too simple, and perhaps later, there will be a skill for which this one will be suitable. He wonders if he should take on a new assignment and heads to the message board, where a crowd of users is already gathered. He searched with his eyes for the highest paid and considered a collective assignment, when a guy comes up to him and asks if Henson remembers him. Is the guy Henson sold a bunch of junk to once, and then he immediately thinks of this guy. It was Amir, and he thought he had made a lasting impression on people. They shook hands. Amir asks what Henson is doing in Vienna if it's because of the castle, which he confirms, but now he's just hunting. And he asks Henson where exactly he's hunting now and offers to join his team. Henson says he was going to the underwater cave just like Amir's team, and now they have the same assignments. Amir discusses his team, where the reward is based on contribution, and he will be able to buy or sell any items that drop off. And with such favorable terms, of course, Henson agrees to play on the team with Amir. This makes him happy, as he says that everyone on the team except him knows each other, so now he has someone he knows. Henson had warned him beforehand that he was a low-level but rare class, so it wouldn't be a problem. He believed and was jealous, so, fortunately, other players couldn't see the data when joining the group. When Henson accepted the invitation, he saw that there were 5 members of the team, and Amir offered to attend the meeting. The meeting was scheduled to take place at the Hafe Dobo Cafe. Henson introduced himself, talked about his rare class, and asked not to be chased away. One archery enthusiast showed an arrow and introduced himself as Kuma, saying the level didn't matter. The other 2 girls identified themselves as Luina, the healer, and Fian, the mage, and greeted Henson pleasantly. And he, in turn, greeted them in the same polite and respectful manner. Writing in the girls' group chat, Kuma turned his attention to his dream belt, obviously plotting something. The girl, Fian, also looked at his sword and thought that the merchant Amir had such plans as well. To which Luina replied that they're both gutless tossers and they'll easily clean them out. And poor Amir had no idea what he'd gotten his friend into, hoping for a good hunt. They arrived at the cave, and the fight with the turtle monsters had already begun. Henson stepped in for Amir and rushed to his aid, who deliberately trapped the monster, attacking the turtle by swinging his sword across its ribcage. But Henson realized that the enemy had a strong shell defense. Henson dodged the lightning bolt and used his sword to take advantage of his defenselessness. Kuma's archer, in turn, also takes aim for a shot at the monster and clearly hits. At that moment, Amir is again attacked by another turtle with an axe and realizes he's too late. But luckily, Henson still manages to fly in and block the axe kick, which was very heavy, and he hadn't planned for it, but it's not a problem. When suddenly, he starts to regain his health all by himself. It turned out to be help from teammate Luina, who he thanks, and it's nothing to her. Henson then continues his siege on the monster and strikes with his sword, and the turtle responds with an axe kick that Henson successfully dodges. At this moment, Fian uses the lightning staff skill aiming at the monster next to Henson, thus killing the turtle, which falls on its belly without breathing. After the victory, the trio decided to discuss how Henson had fought, and now they should be cautious around him. The merchant would not be a problem. Thinking that his sim has been overlooked, he decides he'll have to hunt with these guys more often. He didn't enjoy holding back the power, but it's fun. He gets a power boost for it. Saying he's sending Henson the fin now, Amir says they'll separate the items later, and also sends 547,600 coins for the spoils. Now that the money's split, Amir suggests a vacation, which Henson doesn't like. Squads usually take a lot of vacations. Sitting in a circle, Amir decides to ask where they are going to go next, because the right side is crowded but safer, and the left side is not, due to the higher difficulty there. Kuma wants to go left. as the spirit of adventure is essential to him, and he wants to go where no one has ever been before, despite the risks. And Fionn didn't share that thought. Instead, she said she wanted to go right away to avoid trouble. Liana, in turn, said she would go where Amir told her to go. And of course, Henson is also willing to take risks and has embraced the idea of going left. Joyfully and loudly, Amir announced that since the majority were on the left side, they would go there, where they discovered and defeated the monster shark, although it was noticeably stronger than the last ones. Henson acquired Sharkfin and immediately sold it to Amir for a handsome sum. The fight was brutal, and Amir offered to rest briefly before moving on, which upset Henson. And he thought about the fact that now they were resting more often and longer, and it pissed him off because if they didn't take breaks, they'd be done in an hour. But it's probably normal in regular squads, as the teams we met along the way were also resting a lot. Henson notices that Fionn, Liana, and Kuma are obviously up to something, as they are discussing something and not even hiding it, thinking that no one will notice. He also sneakily watches Henson, which suggests they're planning to steal his items. He decided that if he made one extra move, he would kill them. But Henson didn't fully understand what they wanted from him. Amir didn't seem to be with them. After resting, everyone got up, and Kuma suggested we go on. He would bait the monsters, and Amir would distract them. Henson liked Amir, and as long as the others didn't touch him, he would just watch. He also thought of Rena and Jonah and wondered what they were doing at that moment. They were strong enough to be added as friends. Here, the team has another battle underway. Kuma escapes the shark monster. During this, Amir decides to use his greed charm skill. He throws a coin at the monster shark and hits it right in the head, which dumbfounds it. Enraged, she runs at Amira Henson, admiring these skills and suggesting that he is unique. After this provocation, he punches the monster right in the chest, and Fionn blasts a bolt of lightning. Henson runs the shark off, and in his mind, he thinks he should have succumbed too. At that moment, the monster attacks him with his fist, which means Henson's plan worked. Liana then heals him with her skills, which pleasantly surprises him as he has a good reaction. The shark is then struck by Fionn's lightning spear. The monster is defeated. After the fight, Kuma compliments Fionn on her magic, and she grinningly says to be careful at first, as she might accidentally hit someone. Listening to this conversation, Henson sighs as Amir looks through his inventory, then reports that, unfortunately, this time without the fin, but fell out a lot of other items as well as gold. Kuma, at this point, points to something loudly to get Henson and Amir's attention. Ahead turns out to be a cave in which, at first glance, there is nothing. He doesn't back down from his assumptions, stating that archers have better vision and superior reaction speed. Henson's performance and reaction time are much better in comparison, though. He immediately realizes it's a hoax, but he also wonders what will happen next. Amir joins the conversation and also says he can't see anything ahead, and neither can Henson. But he agrees with the suggestion to look, as it would be interesting for him to find the hidden cave. The whole team decides to go forward and hits a blank wall with nothing on it. Well, there does turn out to be a passageway, and Henson realizes that from that angle, they couldn't see it, so it was all planned. Reaching forward, Kuma announces that he has disarmed the trap, and the door begins to open. Naive Amir is happy that they were able to find the secret dungeon, as he hadn't counted on it, and they all walk together into the huge, high passageway in the rock of the cave that has opened up. Henson walks ahead while the trio walks behind them, discussing the fact that their plan has succeeded, but they have long since been discovered. Ahead of them, they saw a door leading to the boss's room, and decided to take a break before entering. To prepare, Kuma asked Amir to sell him an assortment of arrows. Watching all this, Henson thought about the fact that they still hadn't tried to split up with them, even though they had already entered a secret dungeon hidden from view. He has no idea what the three are up to yet, but he's sure it'll all become clear in the boss's room. But he'd like to get this over with quickly and go to practice. It's unclear why they're prolonging this. Gathering in a circle, the team discusses future attacks, and Amir says that they know nothing about the boss and should be cautious. Turning to Henson, he says he can no longer be a decoy, so he'll have to stand alone in the fight, but he'll always help. Before entering the room, they are asked, as standard, if they are ready to join and warned that they can't leave without winning. All the team members entered, where before them stood a massive monster with 4 arms named Sabertooth Laquitun. Watching him, I remember that I'd never once encountered hidden dungeon monsters and assumed he was stronger than usual. But remembering that he is being tricked, he assumes it will happen during the battle when he is at his weakest. He decides to focus on the boss and throws himself into the fight right at him. He strikes first with his ball, which Amir admires and Kuma resents. Amir then decides to help and uses his gold multiplication skill, thus attracting the monster's attention, which Henson notices and realizes is now his exit. He leaps over the huge Lakwatan, running right over his shoulder. As he jumps, he strikes directly at his opponent's eye and lands in front of him. At the command of the world, the others begin to use their skills, directing them to the monster. As a result, the damage increased by 10% due to the adverse effect. The master turns to Herson, and now it is his turn to decide whether to use his new Mirage boots. Thanks to this, he leaves his clan to attack the monster and safely retreats away. After the boss realizes he's been tricked, he decides to attack Henson with a swinging fist. However, Henson fails to dodge and flies backward from there. Seeing this, the team decides to let all their forces enter, and on command, they begin to attack. This particular moment was the best opportunity to realize Kuma's plan, and he wrote about it in the chat. Leona then informs him that she's low on mana, so she can't heal Henson. And Fian, at this moment, decides to use his lightning discharge skill to consolidate the effect, which, as planned, hits not only the monster shark, but poor Henson as well. The boss bites him on the arm, and Henson realizes it was done on purpose, so he decides to attack. He plunges his sword straight into the neck of his opponent, dealing a critical blow after which he drinks the potion. Trinity doesn't understand how this could happen, and how a player can move so deftly as well. This is the moment Henson realized he wasn't the first victim. I didn't know how the boss would behave, but I knew at what point to set up. After a failed attempt to deal with Henson, Kuma orders him to try again, but this time to aim properly. Fian again uses his skill and sends a lightning discharge, screaming in the moment for Henson to dodge. Happy Henson manages to hear this scream and dodges, and the discharge only hits the boss. I didn't expect this turn of events, and the guys are in shock. Leona is using light beam techniques. From this, Henson also easily realizes that she lied about being able to heal him as well, namely to save his strength for an attack that clearly hit Lakwatan. With a fake exhale, Leona reveals what she supposedly didn't really want. The trio decided that the problem was in the box, because it usually doesn't behave like this, but now all the attacks were hitting it. Watching all these measures, I decided to compliment the team members' play. Finally, they defeat the boss, the saber-toothed Lakwatan, who vanishes into thin air. Then Amir praises the guys sincerely, and Henson tries to play along, not giving away that he figured out their plan. They cleared a secret dungeon in an underwater cave, and the system reported that they would be teleported to Vienna. After the transfer, they did not gather in a circle, and Amir expressed his gratitude for their help in cleaning the cave. And on that positive note, he decided to give away all the gold and items he had dropped from the boss. I was surprised at this, but he explained that he had already gotten enough resources from this hunt to give away. There were only 4 pieces of armor. The sword and gloves were immediately taken away. Watching this, Amir thought the guys had no manners since they didn't ask what Henson would want. After all, he had gotten the Book of Skills, but looking at it, Amir realized there was nothing to worry about. Henson gained the Shark Torpedo skill, and now he can create a Queen of the Seas that attacks with cold water. Looking at the specs, he realized that it's a strong magic, plus it can ignore the cooldown. At this point, Amir suggests that Herson add himself as a friend, to which he responds positively. Now he's got 2 friends, which he didn't say he was happy about. Suddenly, the trio decided to make a hasty exit under the cover of business, and Amir thought they were friendlier at the beginning. Amir then suggested Henson since they were on their way, but Henson declined, saying he had things to do as well. They said goodbye on a good note, promising each other to meet and hunt together. Putting a backpack on his shoulder, Amir goes to Vienna on his own, as it is expensive to spend scrolls. The trio watched all of this, hoping that Henson would leave and not be able to attack Amir quietly. After the fight, Kuma still can't come to his senses, as he doesn't understand why Handsome is so strong. Fian suggests dealing with the merchant first and attacking him from behind. Having agreed to this, Kuma realizes that they have no other way out, and if they rob him, they will get a lot of money. In how much Amir is sufficiently popular and famous to mean a bit of a trade. Suddenly, at this point, they are out of their lives, and Henson has dealt with it, deciding to attack stealthily himself. Since he has defeated several users, his karma points have accumulated, and he jokingly decides he needs to go to church. He suddenly notices that a new skill has been added to the BS store that will help him lower his karma points for BS. After being revived 5 days later, the trio look around, afraid to see what has overcome them. In the confusion of what happened to them at that very moment is Liena. Neither does Fion. I don't know what happened, but I'm sure Henson had nothing to do with it. Supporting this, Kuma also said that if Henson was capable of such a thing, he would use these skills in hunting. In turn, Fion suggested that he had a nickname, which the guys agreed with. Luckily, the idea community is not about them being cheaters and preying on other players. They decide to lay low and still catch a mirror someday. And off to the refuge they go, discussing their record-breaking triumph in the caves along the way. Suddenly, the word hello is heard behind their backs, which terrifies them. Of course, it's Henson who takes them down in a second, selling their equipment on the market. He also gets karma points, but he decides to use the BS to remove them and also to get rare items. He realizes he shouldn't do that to other players, though. It's really fun. At this point, Jaewon gets on the computer and online to release their finished video. He thinks it will gain a lot of views quickly, and he won't even have to promote it. On the morning of the alarm call, Henson wakes up and rises from his capsule. After he comes out of it, he realizes that if it weren't for his narcolepsy skill, he would have just slept like that. As suddenly as he hears his sister Hyuna's voice, he bursts into her room, not realizing what is happening. And she shares the video on social media saying her brother should watch it right away. Afterwards, she gets a slap on the wrist, and Henson wonders what's so important in this video that he needs to watch it. He saw that it was his video, specifically from that battle where he cut the arrow in half, as that was his best part. Coincidentally, Henson says thanks and justifies it by saying it's a video of a friend of Jiwon's. For plausibility, what he told me one night at dinner and says he's seen him before. Impressed, Hyun asks if Henson knows this friend, to which Henson replies affirmatively. Whereupon the sister starts asking for this friend's contact information, and she remembers that Henson owes her a wish, and now she has to fulfill it. She starts asking him to talk Ashura into joining their guild, which is small but elite and very good. To be more convincing, she starts talking about the guild and the fact that they have their own castle, which impresses Henson. And he thinks that he would like to join a guild, as there must be strong allies. And he promises to ask Ashura about it, for which Hyuna thanks him. Now she needs to tell her sis about it. Getting out of bed, she tries to find out anything about the internet hero and his rank. To which Henson replies that he has a legendary rank, but it's best not to tell anyone about it. But the sister intends to tell the head of the guild, to which her brother asks to tell that the rank came out unique. With a big sigh, Hyuna agrees to this and makes a promise to her brother. Afterward, Henson picks her up and offers to take her to the play capsule. Holding her in his arms, he decides to ask her if she's gotten fat, to which Hyuna is shocked. She starts screaming and demanding that he put her in the capsule because there's nothing wrong with her gaining a little bit. Try to make excuses. Henson says she was worried about her health, but her sister said she was fine, and make a comment about how girls shouldn't ever talk about her weight gain. To this, Henson addresses the question of who he is in general, to which he receives the answer that he is a loner. While closing the capsule, she once again reminds her of her request and what she will tell her siblings. As she left the room, Henson thought about the fact that she wanted to please her, but it was better to postpone it. He decides to call his friend back and ask about the video, which he is surprised about because he thought that he would not notice it soon enough. But thanks to his sister, he noticed it. At that moment, he sits down at his computer and opens the internet. Then he enters the query and realizes that his video is on the first place in the top. He obviously didn't expect such popularity, and seeing 30 million views, he is in a stupor. During this time, Yona is actively training and participating in a bear fight, plunges her blade into his neck. He growls at her angrily and loudly, then jumps off him and uses the skill lightning attack, then stuns the bear for 5 seconds. And additionally, attacks with blades and easily wins this fight and gets experience points. But Yona thinks she's still behind Henson's abilities and should exercise harder. As she gathered her loot, she wondered if she had ever met Henson to give the items away. Having finished his work in this place, Yona moves to the town of Rekka, to the main square. It was crowded as usual, and she overheard a conversation between 2 guys who were discussing Ashura's video, about the fact that even the Idea administration noticed the video and put it on the main page as a promo just a day later. Yona didn't understand what this was about, who this Ashura was, or what was even going on, and decided to watch this popular video on the page myself, and opened the menu where I immediately recognized Henson on the screen. Since the sword and mask are very similar, so it's definitely him, but his movements and skills have greatly improved and become smoother. Now, in the castle that belongs to the Guild of Heroes under Rina's leadership sits she. She knew it would go viral, but not this fast. At that moment, Hyuna runs into the room screaming, and Rina asks what's wrong with her. She moves closer to Rina and asks if she has watched Ashura's video and that there is no one who hasn't watched it now, and reports that her brother happens to know this popular YouTuber Ashura, so she asked her to suggest that he join their guild in case he wanted to. Rina was very happy about this and asked her brother to send another message to Ashura, namely that Rina had once met him in the dungeon, and if he didn't want to be added, then let him meet her, that she could return his loot, and Hyuna began to demand a more detailed account of the adventure. He said that since there are people in the guild who know each other, there is a better chance, and they are together, very much hoping for his answer. On returning home to meet Henson, Hyuna comes out in her wheelchair, very excited. He wonders if he's already taken up with Ashura, but he says he hasn't yet because he's busy. Hyuna asks him to also relay a message from Rina that she wants to meet him. Since Henson didn't quite understand what he was talking about, his sister explained that the guild leader, Rin, had already met him in the dungeon, but he was horrified as he thought Hyun had lied to get the meeting. But Hyuna went on to say that Rina knows Ashura from the Wolf's Cave and just wants to return the stuff that fell out of the boss. Whereupon Henson wondered if she was talking about Rina and her second account, which must have been hunting with him. But Hyuna starts asking Henson to set up a meeting for them to socialize as well. He thought about the fact that Rina knew his real name. If she said it in front of his sister, she would immediately realize it, though the items needed to be taken away. Walking into the room, Henson says to ask, but don't let her get her hopes up, as Ashura is a timid person. At this very moment in the Karen Empire, the Emperor is still considering how to organize the event. His servant reports that preparations for the tournament have already begun, although the exact dates are not yet known. However, it should be at least a month away. Preparations will take exactly that much time, plus additional days to review applications for participation, and you need at least 40 days. However, it will unfold as the Emperor intended, and the idea of separating travelers and townspeople is indeed wise. He also orders that the contestants be divided into 4 groups based on their strength. The Empire fighters are now on their 8th day of competition in the east of Vienna. The fighters are moving a large pack of monsters that they cannot defeat. They attack and bite, using their skills against players, thus defeating the team of fighters of the Empire in a puff of dust, and all go to the other world. Then she heads to Vienna to do the master's bidding and take down the descendant of Thanatos, who now suspects nothing and views his reputation, which could be greater if he hunted monsters more often. At the same time, he remembers that very examination with the apostle and thinks about the possibility of making him answer questions again. After which, Henson goes to the Pantheon to gather information about the god Thanatos, where the conditions of entry are a reputation of 100. Going up there, he notices a strange look in the guard's eyes, who tries not to look at him. Henson assumed it was them being so careful to check everyone who comes in, but oddly, it's different with him. But then he saw priests of the faithful behaving differently, and realized that there was something really wrong. He decided to approach them, but noticed that the priests were afraid of him, and they quickly started running away from him. Heard talks behind his back about Henson not being checked out because they thought he was a high priest. But if that were the case, the paladins would treat him with deference and they turned to flee. After these remarks, Henson turned in their direction, and the company turned away sharply, thinking of how to look him in the eye. They kept talking about how hanging out with Henson was no good, but he kept hearing them and started to get angry. Now, even the players shun him. Perhaps they have learned that he is a descendant of Thanatos, though I doubt it. Based on all of this, Henson decided that they would meet no one in this temple of high rank. Suddenly, a man of the highest rank appears in front of him, and Henson decides that he might just get kicked out. As a friend, this man bows to him. He apologizes for not being able to accompany him, as well as for the stupidity of others. Henson then decides to ask them to go somewhere private and discuss everything, since there are a lot of extra eyes and ears. These eyes saw that with some players, a bishop was in charge of the temple and were very surprised. They came to the bishop's chambers in the pavilion, where Henson pressed, and he felt ashamed because his grandfather was standing in front of him while he was sitting down. As the grandfather suddenly introduced himself as Balian in charge of the temple, Henson realized he was not a bishop and was disappointed. Well, Henson's response was to tell him not to worry and to think that he should get out of there as soon as possible. So he decided to ask a question, but suddenly the door burst open. Henson stood up abruptly, thinking it was an attack. At the door came a man in the form of a priest, who emerged from the dust, his face tear-stained. As soon as he saw Henson in front of him, He fell to his knees and hit his forehead right into the floor, which cracked because of it. Raising his head, he introduced himself as Libeus, priest of Thanatos and Henson's humble servant. Still, he thought that was a bizarre reaction. After what Henson had seen, he didn't care why he had come here and just needed to leave quickly. Seeing the green writing above his head, he realized it had something to do with his assignment and that it was calling him to the altar for new skills. I doubted whether I should have trusted them and followed him, but I had to agree as there was nothing else to do. They had already come to the altar of the god Thanatos. Henson's surprise was that there were no priests there. After that, he still has a hard time deciding to ask Libeus for help. But then he falls to his knees again and says he doesn't need to be addressed so formally because he deserves it. He demanded to be addressed as you. Only then would he get off his knees, and Henson had to agree. And he decided to ask a question to get Libeus to tell him something about the god Thanatos, not he motioned for him to sit down. He poured the tea, and there was an awkward pause, which made Libeus think there was something wrong with the tea. Henson suggested that we return to the subject of the god Thanatos. Libeus began his story by saying that the god Thanatos is one of the most powerful gods in the game. At this point, Henson was only embarrassed that this awkward atmosphere hadn't changed even after 10 minutes. He expected the story to continue, but again, there was an awkward pause that made Libeus think he had something on his face.